Prayers.
Almighty God, our Heavenly Father, send forth, we beseech thee, upon thy servants who bear office in this country, the spirit of charity and justice, that they may in all things walk before thee with steadfast purpose and a single heart, and faithfully serve in their several offices, through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. Most gracious God, author of all good things, we humbly beseech thee for the Parliament of Barbados, especially the Senate at this time assembled, that thou wouldest be pleased to direct and prosper all their counsels to the advancement of thy glory, the good of thy church, the safety, honor, and welfare of our people. All this we ask in the name of Jesus Christ, our most blessed Lord and Savior. Amen. And together we say it, the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive them that trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. May the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit be with us all now and forevermore. Amen.
The Senate is in session.
Messages from Her Excellency the President. Announcements by Your Honor the President.
I've received apologies for absence from a number of senators, many of whom are overseas, otherwise engaged. Senator Malalu, Senator Drakes, Senator Cannon Dr. Rogers, Senator the Most Honorable Dr. Walcott, Senator the Honorable Chad Blackman, Senator Monique Tate. Indications of late arrival to the prayer commitment, Senator Kevin Boyce and Her Honor Senator Thompson. I received, in relation to our minutes of our meeting held on Monday, March 25th, 2024, these are to be deferred. Senator Cummings.
Mr. President, I beg to move the deferral of the minutes of Monday, March 24th at this time.
The question is that the minutes of our meeting held on Monday, March 25th be deferred. Will all honorable senators in favor please say aye? Aye. Those against please say no. The next ayes have it. Those minutes are accordingly deferred.
Presentation of petitions, presentation of papers.
Senator Cummings.
Mr. President, I have a number of documents that I am commanded to lay. They are as follows: the audited financial report and financial statements of the Grantley Adams International Airport for the year 2020-2021, the audited financial report and financial statements of the Grantley Adams International Airport for the year 2021 to 2022, and the same for the period 2022-2023, and that is the audited financial report and financial statements for the GAIA for the years 2020 to 2021, 2021 to 2022, and then finally 2022 to 2023. I also am commanded to lay loan contract number 5846/OCBA between the Government of Barbados and the Inter-American Development Bank, the title Climate Resilient and Sustainable Integrated Coastal Zone Management. The Barbados Revenue Authority Amendment Order of 2024, the 2022 Annual Report of the Department of Emergency Management, DEM, and then finally the Immigration ICC Cricket World Cup West Indies 2024 Mutual Regulation of Visas Regulations 2024.
Reports from select committees, questions to ministers, request for leave to move the adjournment of the Senate on matters of urgent public importance, statements by ministers or parliamentary secretaries, personal explanations. Motions relating to the business or hostilities of the Senate, moved by Minister.
Senator Cummins.
Mr. President, I beg to move the suspension of Article 4 of Clause 45(2) for the remainder of today's sitting.
The question is that Standing Order 45-2 be suspended for the remainder of today's sitting. Will all honorable senators in favor please say aye? Those against please say no. The things the ayes have it. Standing Order 45-2 is therefore suspended for the remainder of today's sitting.
Introduction of bill.
Senator Cummins.
Mr. President, I beg to move the first reading of the ICC Cricket World Cup West Indies Bill 2024, and to beg your permission to have this item on the order. Sorry, wait. So the first reading of the ICC Cricket World Cup West Indies Bill 2024 and the first reading of the Visiting Police Forces ICC Cricket World Cup 2024.
The question is that the ICC Cricket World Cup West Indies Bill 2024 and the Visiting Police Forces ICC Cricket World Cup 2024 Bill 2024 be read the first time. Will all honorable senators in favor please say aye? Aye. Those against please say no. The things the ayes have it, those bills are accordingly read a first time.
Public business, sir.
Public business is now the order of the day.
Order number 3, in the name of Senator Dr. the Honorable Chantal Monroe-Knight, Minister in the Prime Minister's Office, to move the second reading of the ICC Cricket World Cup West Indies Bill 2024.
Senator Dr. Monroe-Knight.
Mr. President, I beg permission that the two items on the order paper, the Visiting Forces ICC Cricket World Cup 2004 bill, on the order paper item number 4, and as well the ICC Cricket World Cup West Indies Bill 2024 be taken as a cognate, as both of these matters relate to facilitation for the Cricket World Cup.
The question is that items number 3 and 4, two pieces of legislation related to facilitation of ICC Cricket World Cup 2024, that those matters be taken as a cognate debate. Just as a reminder, well, that means we will have one second reading with consideration of the policy matters related to both. They will each be voted for individually at the appropriate stage. So the question is that those bills, that debate on those two bills be taken as a cognate debate. Will all honorable senators in favor please say aye? Aye. Those against please say no. The things the ayes have it, we will therefore take items 3 and 4 as a cognate debate. Senator Dr. Chantal Monroe-Knight, please continue.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, as we indicated and agreed that both of these items speak to various aspects of requirements to ensure that the country is ready to host the upcoming Cricket World Cup. In particular, the bill Visiting Police Forces ICC Cricket World Cup 2024 bill specifically makes provision that any visiting overseas law enforcement is treated as local law enforcement under the command of the Commissioner of Police. Mr. President, I want to make it clear that this bill makes provision, if need be, for us to employ or have extra law enforcement personnel on the island in the event of any circumstance. So the bill is trying to ensure that we will have in place all of the necessary security facilities, personnel, and human resource that there is. Mr. President, as we would have heard in the other place, Barbados, as we previously hosted in 2007, the finals, and 2010, did not necessarily need extra police force, but we are in a different time. And therefore, this bill seeks to ensure that we do have that provision should we need it as well. Mr. President, the other bill which is in relation to the ICC Cricket World Cup West Indies bill, really speaks to the logistics of the rollout of the Cricket World Cup. In particular, it notes that the stadium, as they called in the bill, which is Kensington Oval, will be under the complete authority of Cricket West Indies. So that at the time that we have Cricket World Cup, the facility no longer, Mr. President, is under our control. We are handing it over to Cricket World Cup, and they will be the body that will be in charge of all elements of Cricket World Cup that happens in the context of Kensington Oval, Mr. President. Mr. President, we do not believe that these matters are contentious. There is sufficient precedent for these, Mr. President. We would have had similar bills, similar pieces of legislation as the country, as I would have indicated previously, would have hosted previous World Cup in 2010 and the finals as well, Mr. President. And again, because this Cricket World Cup is being hosted across the Caribbean and also, of course, within the United States is participating as well, but it means that we have to have coordinated efforts, Mr. President. And therefore, as we are rolling out these pieces of legislation, they will similarly be rolled out in all of the other Caribbean countries. Barbados, Mr. President, is first, but the expectation is that we will have similar legislation being rolled out across the other territories that are also participating in Cricket World Cup, Mr. President. Mr. President, we are in a state of go. I cannot even say readiness. It is go, because Cricket World Cup will take place in Barbados from June 1st to June 30th, but we already have signals that there will be some teams already on the island during the month of May. As I understand it, we will have the delegation from Oman arriving about May 16th. They're already signaling that they're looking forward to playing some practice matches, which I think we would all agree is good for us, good for the island, that we would have our cricketers exposed again to being able to play against teams that are participating in the World Cup. So it is really, Mr. President, go time for the country. And in the context of it being go time for the country, Mr. President, we know that for us in Barbados, cricket is more than just a game. I think that those of us who really understand cricket, who understand the history of the game, but not only the history of the game, but the history of our development, would have made the link, of course, with C.L.R. James's book, Beyond the Boundary, and understand that very much that the socio-cultural, social-political, and socio-economic makeup of this island is also bound in the game of cricket. That cricket is not just about the bat and the ball, but cricket is about a game of resistance and resilience. And that is one that is very bound up in the history and the trajectory of Barbados. And it is also as well, Mr. President, noted that this Cricket World Cup, as I said, taking place in June, comes at a time when we are still celebrating our status as a republic. And it comes as well at a time when we are also celebrating the season of emancipation. And again, that would only mean something if you really understand cricketing history and if you really understand the fundamentals of what it meant to see those men, particularly in that era, step on that field, wearing that white, and bowling and batting. So that, Mr. President, and for Barbados as well, there is a special relationship with cricket and with West Indies cricket. I am sure my fellow Senator, Gregory Nichols, will expound on this, but certainly we know that Barbados has given the world the 3 W's, we've given the world cigar fuel sobers, Mr. President. There was an article that I came across in 2022, written in the Guardian newspaper, where the commentator, Alan Martin, was suggesting that Barbados has a claim to be one of the most productive cricketing nations per capita. Essentially, he was saying that if you look at all of the great cricketers, all of the cricketers who have emerged, the large majority of them came from Barbados. Mr. President, he went on to quote some stats that suggested when you look at those cricketers that played against England, he was saying that 98 of them, he quoted, he said 385, Mr. President, on a list. And out of that 385, 95 came from Barbados. So that we have that history, that profound history that ties our who we are and our development to cricket across the West Indies. But for Barbados, especially, we have an important relationship. We have a special relationship. And therefore, it is no wonder that as a government and as a people, we would want to put our best foot forward as we prepare to welcome Cricket World Cup here in Barbados at this particular time. Mr. President, I am told that there was a final inspection that was done by the ICC and also as well Cricket West Indies. And in terms of all of the metrics for readiness, that Barbados, I'm pleased to report, was way in advance of the other locations within the region. And again, that is important because we also recognize, Mr. President, that we had a mere 9 months, Mr. President, to be able to put together all that was required to fast track what was needed in order to make sure that Barbados would be prepared. A mere 9 months to do it. And we are doing so, getting high marks for it, and far in advance of our neighbors who are also preparing, Mr. President. So at a time, Mr. President, where, and I must admit that I'm one of those who can sometimes be unsure about what is happening with our West Indies cricket team, I must admit. But this is a time, Mr. President, when we put that aside, and as a country, it is a time for national pride. It is a time when, Mr. President, we want to show off, Mr. President. It is a time when we want to be able to welcome visitors. And it is a time, Mr. President, when we want to be able to rally as a nation. There is already an air of excitement. We saw, Mr. President, pictures of all of those who went down to Kensington to try to get some tickets. Yes, they unfortunately had to wait in lines due to technical difficulties. But, Mr. President, they stood, they gathered there for love of game and love of country, Mr. President. Mr. President, there has been a lot of unfortunate hue and cry over the work that this government has undertaken to make sure that the country is ready to make sure, as I said before, that we put our best foot forward, to make sure that we can welcome our visitors and to make sure that we have fit-for-purpose facilities across the island. And it is something that I cannot understand, Mr. President, because I believe that all of us as Barbadians have grown up and know what it is, what happens, what we do when we prepare to welcome visitors, even within our homes, Mr. President. Mr. President, you spruce up, you clean up. If you know they're coming in advance, you put down a little something so that you can have a little bit of extra groceries. You buy new bed sheets. You clean up all the things in the house that you have. So at the household level, we understand that when people are coming and you want to welcome them, Mr. President, that you go the extra mile, that you extend yourself, Mr. President. And yes, you want the visitors to feel comfortable in your home, but it is an experience for everybody in that household. Everybody welcomes them. Everybody looks forward to the visit. All the newness that happens, Mr. President, the entire household shares in. And it is a similar experience that this government, Mr. President, is having as we build out our readiness for World Cup 2024. And Mr. President, from the very beginning, when we started this process, and I did not participate in all of the meetings, but just a few of them, as we were preparing to put together the bid documents. And there were some core questions that we continually asked ourselves as we prepared our bid. And those questions had to do with, one, how are we going to ensure the average Barbadian benefited? How are we going to ensure that the average Barbadian saw themselves as being a part of this Cricket World Cup experience? How, Mr. President, are we going to ensure that we leveraged everything that we have as a nation? How are we going to ensure that we leverage that national pride, Mr. President, innovation, all of the elements that make Barbados what it is in our hosting of Cricket World Cup? So that the design of Cricket World Cup, the very design of our bid, ensured that we inculcated those elements, Mr. President, to ensure that the Barbadian people will be able to benefit. Enjoy cricket, as I said before, because of that sentimental, that sentiment that we have with cricket, but also as well be able to reap the economic benefits from the hosting of the various matches that we have in Barbados, including the finals. Mr. President, so that even as we heard all of the noise and you know, all of the cries and the blustering about what is happening, one of the things for me that seemed to get lost in the discussion and the debate fundamentally is, like I said before, people. Yes, we're building out infrastructure, but we aren't building out infrastructure for infrastructure's sake, Mr. President. It is about people and the benefits for people, Mr. President. It is about the fisher folk in Oistins, Mr. President. It is about people like Pat and Eddie and Sharon and Michelle and Natasha. People, Mr. President. People, Mr. President. I'm hearing some names called, Mr. President, but I don't know if they are familiar with the area, Mr. President. They may not know any of the names that I have called because apparently they don't frequent the area often enough to know and be intimately know the persons who would be able to benefit from all of the works of the government is doing, Mr. President. Mr. President, what the design in terms of the upgrade and its benefits for people, let's talk about, Mr. President, the upgrades to the roads, which have always been planned under the Ministry of Transport and Works, Mr. President. Mr. President, 9 months to prepare for this. So that, of course, we would have had to fast track some of the actions that would have been previously planned for rollout at a later time. So these plans did not drop from the sky all of a sudden, but part of government's ongoing agenda to build the infrastructure, one, yes, in terms of roads, but also in terms of Oistins, also in terms of Spikestown, also in terms, Mr. President, of 6 Roads in St. Philip, always on the agenda. But as we prepare now for World Cup 2024, the government has fast-tracked these areas so, again, that we can be able to ensure that citizens and visitors during this period then are able to fully enjoy the experience. But importantly, Mr. President, it is the Barbadian public that benefits and that will benefit from the enhanced roadworks across Highway 7. It is the Barbadian public, Mr. President, that will enjoy and benefit from the roadworks across Bridgetown, Mr. President, and all across Barbados. It is the Barbadian public, Mr. President, that will enjoy. The hosting of Cricket World Cup will not only boost tourism, Mr. President, it is anticipated that we will have over $20 million spent on accommodation alone. $20 million on accommodation alone. And that is not just hotel accommodation, Mr. President, that's Airbnbs. That's the little man who put on a little piece there to be able to welcome visitors. That's the average Barbadian, Mr. President, that will be able to also get a share of that pie, of that 20 million. But that 20 million in accommodation is but one part of a larger pie, Mr. President. It is anticipated again that based on ticket sales that we have, based on what we are seeing in terms of accommodation, and the fact that people have to get transport, Mr. President, they have to eat, Mr. President, they will go out, Mr. President, and party, Mr. President. They will undertake a number of different activities while on the island so that we can see then a tripling of those benefits, Mr. President, throughout the economy. But that is not the only big benefit of Cricket World Cup in terms of just tourism, because there are a number of benefits as well for entrepreneurs. And as I began, Mr. President, by saying, it is a deliberate design by this government to make sure that the average Barbadian, the ordinary Barbadian, is able to participate, and in particular, our entrepreneurs. So that as part of the design, we will see, Mr. President, in conjunction with the Trust Fund Loan, Fund Access, and the Youth Entrepreneurship Scheme and the Barbados Youth Business Trust, 6 entrepreneurs marketplace across Broad Street, from the Republic Bank Junction to the Hero Square, every Saturday, Mr. President, in June 2024, Mr. President. Opportunities for entrepreneurs, bringing together all of the agencies that can identify persons who are investing in their business, need opportunities, Mr. President, in order to be able to grow their business and making provision for them to have space. That is the ordinary Barbadian, Mr. President. But, Mr. President, that is not all. In the same Oistins area, even as we will be undertaking refurbishments, we will also be providing space again for vendors as well. Entrepreneurs to be able to sell throughout that period on the Saturdays and Fridays, Mr. President, as well. Entrepreneurs getting opportunities, Mr. President. Mr. President, can I talk about the fan zones that will be established in Pelican Village, Oistins, and Haymans as well, Mr. President? Again, and if any of you had visited Haymans, that is also a growing hub for entrepreneurs to be able to sell, for entrepreneurs to be able to expose themselves, Mr. President, to visitors, for orders. And again, not centralizing the activities of Cricket World Cup only within the vicinity, but as well creating hubs, again, to broaden the benefit that will come from Cricket World Cup. It will come, Mr. President, those benefits will come to communities, because we will also support community watch parties. If communities want to have such watch parties, as long as they are not charging an entrance fee and they're going to be free and there's some level of facilities, those watch parties, Mr. President, will also be supported. Because again, the deliberate design for Cricket World Cup, again, is for Barbadians, for people across the country to be able to benefit as well. Mr. President, we have the neighborhood project that will happen within the community in the immediate vicinity of Kensington Oval, that will allow as well households to be able to benefit, many of them benefiting from short-term employment, Mr. President. And again, being very deliberate in the design, Mr. President, of what we have done in terms of this rollout. We have said, Mr. President, to ICC and Cricket West Indies, that as you seek to engage service providers, that there are service providers who normally operate within Kensington Oval, and that they should have the first right of refusal, Mr. President. And we have said this up front to Cricket West Indies. And so that means then, again, caterers, people providing janitorial services, Mr. President. People providing security services, Mr. President. Vendors who would normally be able to ply their trade within Kensington Oval and around Kensington Oval, Mr. President, will continue to be accommodated, Mr. President. So that Cricket World Cup is a national event. It is a national event. And that notion of we are doing it as a country, Mr. President, is also taking place at the level of government. All, Mr. President, of the government agencies, government departments have been asked to play a critical role in the rollout of this World Cup. Each agency has to account for their particular area, including, Mr. President, hurricane preparedness. What will happen if we have rains, Mr. President? If we have a sudden storm, Mr. President? If you've been watching all of the statistics and the reports, it indicates that we are going to have a very interesting hurricane season. And so even that we are preparing for and asking the ministries to make sure that they have plans. My own ministry, the Division of Culture, Mr. President, is playing a key role through the National Cultural Foundation to make sure that we include culture. I remember, Mr. President, when I met with the local organizing committee, one of the things that I said to them, the culture and heritage is not just about the performance, that we have to ensure that when we build out and integrate culture within the activities for World Cup 2024, that we do so not in an instrumental way with, yes, people dancing and yes, people performing and holding some pom-poms, but that there has to be a way in which our visitors are interacting with our culture, are getting to appreciate our culture, Mr. President. And we are doing so through the National Culture Foundation. We'll be undertaking several activities, including, Mr. President, every day when people arrive, having a welcome of entertainers, but mainly heritage entertainers. So that's the tuk, that's the stilt, Mr. President. Those things that are part of our heritage, we are making sure is included within the build-out of Cricket World Cup, and how this country will make sure that we leverage what is the best of Barbados, Mr. President. Mr. President, I want to indicate as well that all of the infrastructure that is being built out now, again, is leverage also for later. I don't know that people realize that Barbados has also won the bid to host England at the end of this year in November. So the extra seats that are part of the build-out for Kensington, Mr. President, will benefit us not now, but later, Mr. President. The spruce up and complete renovations of the bathrooms at Kensington Oval. And Mr. President, I was warned, I did the initial tour before any of the renovations, and I was lucky enough, I wasn't asked, Mr. President, but I snuck in because I wanted to be able to see the before and after. It is a complete difference, Mr. President. Anybody who goes into those bathrooms now will not, Mr. President, associate it with what was there before, Mr. President. The lights that have gone up, I remember I was down there when I did again that tour, and I looked into the light stand and saw water and was so dismayed that I could not understand how we had a light stand and water in it with electricals, Mr. President. All of that has been renovated. We now have 2 new lighting towers, Mr. President, state of the art, so that our levels in terms of lighting now are on par internationally anywhere in the world, Mr. President. We have new scoreboards, Mr. President, at Kensington. The grass in the outfield, again, completely resurfaced, Mr. President. Bathrooms upgraded. I remember when I went into the area for the players, and there were some, I don't even know what you call them. You know, at school you've got these things that put your stuff in, lockers. These old lockers that you bend up, mash up, some had no handles, and that was what we were using before. You go into those players' rooms now, Mr. President, again, state-of-the-art ice baths, Mr. President. When I went there, there was one little thing so, and now there are 2, state-of-the-art, completely renovated, Mr. President. The area as well, for the umpires, I remember there was one single bathroom, Mr. President, that was working. And I was there and I was saying, but so there's no male, there's no female. You have not made provision. And at first, we could not see how would we be able to get additional bathrooms in there. Right down there, Mr. President, additional bathrooms, including showers, Mr. President, have been put in. The media room as well, completely renovated. And that is the level of investment there. But that is not just, Mr. President, investment from June 1st to June 30th. That is investment, Mr. President, that this country then will be able to reap, Mr. President, for a lifetime. After Kensington Oval, 15 years, Mr. President, without any major upgrades. Without any major upgrades. And I do want to make the point, Mr. President, because when I was minister with responsibility for Kensington Oval, these upgrades were on the card, Mr. President. If we look at the estimates even for 2022 to 2023, 2023 to 2024, you will see all along that Kensington was putting money within the budget to facilitate these upgrades. Kensington was putting money within the budget to replace those lighting stars, Mr. President, to refurbish and to paint, Mr. President, to change up the roof, Mr. President. So even as we again have fast-tracked in the context of World Cup, these were all upgrades that were on the cards, Mr. President. The same thing for the much-aligned Oystons, Mr. President, much aligned. But the representative for the constituency and his clear dismay that the government was investing in the upgrades of Oystons, Mr. President. Mr. President, the upgrades in Oystons, as we would have heard in the other place, were part of the previous administration. Mr. President, they started there. This government, again, in its manifesto, Mr. President, had the upgrades as well as part of its own work. And we see the manifestation of that work now in what is happening in Oystons. I was very lucky, Mr. President, to be able to do a walkthrough and to see the work already that is taking place, Mr. President. Each and every stall, bar none, each and every stall. We don't look at who is who or where they come from or whatever. Each and every stall, Mr. President, being repainted, Mr. President. Each and every stall having new countertops. Each and every stall that is facing out either to the road or facing out to the sea, Mr. President, have the building infrastructure to make sure that they have adequate covering. And importantly, Mr. President, I remember when I had some meetings with the fisher folk, and one of the problems that they were identifying was the bathrooms, particularly for women, Mr. President. That there were not adequate toilet facilities. And many times all of the women had one bathroom that sometimes visitors, when they came as well, also had to use. And they had to depend sometimes on the workers from NCC to give them a little ease and use their bathrooms. And now under the upgrades, Mr. President, we will have new bathroom facilities as well. The area in the fish market will be completely scrubbed, Mr. President, already happening, Mr. President. We will have a state-of-the-art stage for the Oysons Bay Garden, Mr. President. And those are all areas that this government is facilitating. I don't know why my side is not clapping for those initiatives that the government is doing and undertaking, substantive, Mr. President, because they would want to say that it is only Oystons. But it's also happening, Mr. President, in Baxter's Road, Mr. President. What happened at the member? The honorable leader of the opposition is not only asking for accountability for what happened in the Baxter's Road, Mr. President. Did he not only know and understand that the government had also planned to roll out that same level of upgrades in Dover, but that the vendors themselves said, listen, we want to optimize and therefore we don't want to be disrupted, and then those upgrades will happen after, Mr. President, the World Cup? So this is not a flash in the pan, and now to make a political point, Mr. President, this government is more strategic than that. More strategic than that, Mr. President. More focused than that in ensuring that the benefits for this Cricket World Cup, Mr. President, is for the nation of Barbados. Not a particular group, Mr. President, We are not presiding for this World Cup for people from the Barbados Labour Party. We're not presiding for this World Cup for only cricket lovers, Mr. President. We are presiding over this World Cup to ensure that the benefits economically, Mr. President, as I talked about in the context of tourism, in the context of the small entrepreneurs, Mr. President, but also as well, all of the infrastructure that is there now. And one of the things, Mr. President, we are doing is making sure that we are having climate resilient infrastructure built, Mr. President. And that is why we agreed, again, if you go back to our sins, Mr. President, that we will not just have awnings there, but that we will have more resilient coverings built to make sure, again, that we are building out, not just for now, not just for June 1st to June 30th, but that we are building out, Mr. President, infrastructure that will last over time. Government being strategic, Mr. President. Mr. President, I also as well want to point out again that as we roll out our readiness for Cricket World Cup, that we have ensured, again, that we maintain some of the fundamental elements that characterize Barbados and how we will treat our visitors. So again, Mr. President, you will see the party stand being in operation. You will see, again, culture, many of our cultural figures being involved, being encouraged, Mr. President, during the day to be able to interact, to be able to perform, Mr. President, throughout Kensington Oval. And again, ensuring ordinary Barbadians, Mr. President. We ain't bringing in nobody from overseas to come and entertain. Ordinary Barbadians, Mr. President. Ordinary Barbadians benefiting and again, participating in the initiative. Mr. President, as I close, I want again to assure all that we are doing as a government everything that is possible to make sure that the citizens of Barbados can be proud of Barbados as we host Cricket World Cup 2024, Mr. President. I want to assure, Mr. President, that as a government, we have been deliberate in our design. That is not to say that it's going to be 100%, but that is to say that we have made every effort, Mr. President, to ensure inclusivity in the process, again, across government agencies, across stakeholders, Mr. President, to ensure that we have a World Cup that benefits Barbados. Mr. President, I am obliged, and I do beg that these two bills now be read. Sorry.
Order number 3.
Mr. President, I beg that the ICC Cricket World Cup West Indies bill be read 2004, be read a second time.
Thank you, Senator Dr. Milroy-Light. Senator Walters.
Thank you and good morning, Mr. President. Good morning to my fellow senators. Cricket World Cup and Barbados. I must commend my fellow senator for her presentation, and I am in support of the motive behind the Barbados hosting of the World Cup. We understand the economic boost that it will give to the country in June. We understand that tourist arrivals will be up. We understand that teams are coming in, there will be managers, there will be coaches, physios, etc. We understand that fans will come in to support them. Cricket lovers from around the world will come to Barbados. And that will bring some economic benefit to Barbados. And I don't think that is nothing to disagree with. We welcome it. Sir, we agree as well that they have to eat out. They have to use our local transportation, so taxi men will get work, small vendors will get work. even that, Mr. Senator Joaquin. But everybody, the economy will benefit. right? And that is what we need in this economy right now. We need economic activity. So it is something to support. We also understand, sir, that there will be employment, and when I say employment, I anticipate that there will be employment in the private sector, but it should be private sector driven, because if there's going to be expansion of tourists and so forth, private sector will need to employ a few hands as well, and that there will not be a high reliance on government to put all the jobs on the ground. So I think it augurs well for the economy and where Barbados wants to go, at least in the short term. We benefit also too, sir, extends to Barbadians who love to be part of history, who will want to be at the Mecca, who will want to be at Kensington Oval for the final. As you're well aware, tickets are on sale, and who can afford will be buying tickets or have already started to buy tickets. I would anticipate that somewhere down the line that there might be some subvention to maybe make some of the tickets cheaper to some Barbadians, etc. I'm not sure what the government's plans are, but I believe that that will be welcomed as well. But sir, because we support the concept and notion of the Cricket World Cup, it doesn't mean that we can't ask questions. It doesn't mean that the Barbadian public must just accept everything that is being promoted by the government. And it is fair, sir, to ask a few questions and to ask the government to be accountable for the investment that is being made with taxpayers' money on behalf of the taxpayers. And we are well aware of the $50 million loan, and it's not to rehash what we already know, but it is to ask for some accountability and some transparency. Because while we are aware that $50 million have been borrowed, and that Barbados or Barbadians will be on the hook for that $50 million over the next 7 years, we know that the Kensington Oval Management, Inc. does not earn enough revenue to even sustain its operation, and so taxpayers will have to fit that bill again. We also know, sir, that the $200 million or so that was borrowed in 2007 to redevelop Kensington, and that has made Kensington and participated in making cricket, international cricket what it is for Barbados, I believe we are still paying that loan. So it is not unethical for us to ask for some details of how the money is going to be spent. So we have heard that $25 million will be spent on the Oval. We have heard stout defense of how that $25 million will be spent. We've heard about the lights. We've heard about the bathrooms. We heard about the development in terms of the batting cages and use of technology. And that is all well, sir. What we are left to hear is how the remaining $25 million will be spent. We understand, and I'll get into that a little later, about the resurgence of cricket. But not even in the other house was the minister responsible for sport laid out a plan on how that $25 million will be spent in the resurgence of cricket. But what we hear is that we hear about an additional $5 million that is being spent on oysters, and I mean my honorable fellow senator here has...
Mr. President, sorry, I'm raising a point of order, and to indicate that we would have had a previous debate on the Afrexim Bank loan, where we would have gone through all of the details. We would have gone through the scope of works. That, of course, may have preceded the honorable senators coming into this chamber, but we would have had that debate, Mr. President, where those questions would have been raised in relation to the $25 million loan, even down to what it meant in the context of interest and how the government would pay back the interest in respect of that.
Please proceed, Senator Walters.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. My position, sir, is we understand the loan. What we understand is how we're going to use the money. And we have not heard how the $25 million is going to be used for the advancement of the sport that is being touted by this government. But sir, a lot of time was spent on oysters, and I think the honorable senator did a good job in competing for trying to be the next candidate in that constituency. And she has an advantage over the other three, and I think she's using that advantage, sir. But, sir, it is more than oysters. It is $25 million that's being spent on the advancement of cricket, and in the other place, we have not heard an account, not even from the minister, how the government intends to utilize that $25 million for the advancement of cricket in this country. And I think the Barbadian public deserves to have a layout. Sir, we are in a position, and when I say we, the country is in a position where we are asked to repay loans. And we know, and I know, that we have to borrow for our development. But we also know that we have to be accountable to the people. We cannot have a situation where we are going through the World Cup, and then in the middle of June, we hear that we're going to spend another $2 million on all of the other areas, the fan zones and the marketplaces. And so we cannot be afforded with such surprises. If these are plans that are already being cemented, and the Honorable Senator has said that Cricket World Cup is a goal, that means the information should be able to be provided. But it is not good enough to just say arbitrary, oh, we're going to do this. Where is the money coming from? How are we utilizing the funds? So, sir, that is what our concern is. Our concern, we support it, we get it. It is important for our economy in the short term, in the immediate, but we need some accountability from this government. Sir, I have heard that there will be, what I'm hearing is that there will not be many surprises. But we know, sir, in the past that there have been surprises. There have been situations where, sir, all of a sudden, there's a big free concert that is costing taxpayers money again. So I feel rest assured today that we will not have a surprise of a big free concert that is going to cost taxpayers millions of dollars when we are hosting the World Cup. If there is, this is now the time to lay those cards on the table, say what we are doing, and say how much it's going to cost. Because again, sir, the taxpayers are going to pay back these loans. We're going to be asked, we are being asked to pay back the debt. We're going to ask, when there's a deficit, we are asked to fill the void. So, sir, I am happy in this moment to be able to be a part of this World Cup. I myself have two sons, two teenage sons who have played cricket from the time they were 6 years old. They played for primary school, they played for Wanderers, Isolation. So they haven't bought the tickets yet, but they're asking about the tickets. I'm a footballer. No, but I'm saying that I know about packing the Sunday lunch and spending the day out at cricket on a Sunday. I know about Saturday mornings at the pitch, sitting down 2 hours watching them bat, bowl, field, etc. And I've seen many of their little friends who have now actually gone on to play for Barbados and for the cricket junior team. So we understand it. So if Cricket World Cup, as the chairman of the National Organization Committee has said, is supposed to have a primary goal of the resurgence of cricket in this country, then we need a detailed plan on how they're planning to do that. I am sure Senator Nichols, when he rises, or if he rises, will be able to shed some light, a part of the BC, etc. But we're concerned about this because I am told that we do not have an adequate schools program in cricket. Yes, I am told that. And it is for you to discuss these things in here so that the members of the fraternity will be able to respond, because this is not about the BLP and the DLP. This is about what people are saying that are involved in the sport. The feeder program is not aggressive. We do not have enough technical experience in the schools. And you will see, sir, that where there is a good or sufficient technical support in the schools, there's excellence. You have to look at the Commonwealth School, the Queen's College School, Foundation School, and at different times, at various times of the cycle, you see schools pop up. But behind the performance is strong technical support. So we are merely calling for a layout, a plan, because $25 million is a lot of money. $25 million is a lot of money. And we are calling for an account. And we hope that it is done in a way that is not prohibitive to the sustainability of the sport. But sir, this is an interesting conversation, not only from the aspect of the economic benefits of now, not only about the resurgence, as they would say, of cricket, but about the whole conversation about legacy benefits. And why not pouring cold water on the whole project? I think we have to look back and look at the analysis and the data, because we have history. In 2007, Australia defeated Sri Lanka in Barbados. In May 26, 2010, England defeated Australia in the final here at Kensington Oval, so there's history. And the good thing is it is across governments. So it's not time to take pot shots at the bees or try to defend the Democratic Labour Party. I'm saying we have a history now of 2 World Cups that we now have the opportunity to look at the data and look at some of those legacy benefits, because we can't just be talking, well, no, we have to start to talk facts. And once we look at the data, it will start to give us some idea of how well we've been doing when we compare to some of the targets and the goals and the legacy, and then inform us on how we should approach these things in the future. Because it is not only about infrastructure, which I don't think that taxpayers should have to wait for World Cup to speed up infrastructural improvements. There should not be a correlation. If the roads need fixing, we should fix them as a government. Right? So it is about how do we start to look at the data, the history, and start to have this conversation about the legacy benefits of a country. I draw your attention, sir, to some data from the Barbados Statistical Service. And we look at the tourist arrivals over the period of 2008 to possibly 2012. And the stayover passengers 2 years after the 2007 World Cup were 8% below 2007. The overnight visitors in 2012, 2 years after the 2010 World Cup, had increased by 0.77% of 2010. Right? So, sir, I bring to your attention that we have not been successful in the past to say firmly that we have created a legacy benefit from hosting the Cricket World Cup in tourism. We have seen a spike in the tourism numbers in the month of the hosting of the World Cup. In April, in 2007, in April, that had the highest arrivals for the month. In 2010, however, May had the 6th highest stayover visitors for the year. So, sir, I'm saying in a macro picture, these are things, this is analysis that the government must take into account. Not as a negative, but how do we fix it? How are we marketing the event? How are we ensuring that people are returning? How are we actually getting the attention of persons that come to Barbados? Or is it that these persons are just traveling for cricket and they're not normal leisure travelers? They're not persons that want to come for sea and sun and so forth, because that could be the case. But sir, all I'm saying to you is that the data around tourism has not been convincing when it comes to a legacy benefit for our country. And 8 years after 2007, and given that we had the 2010 World Cup, visitors' arrivals rose by 4.25% from 2007. So there has been an increase over time, but I'm sure that it cannot be only attributed to the Cricket World Cup. We have BTMI, we have Barbados, we had the Barbados Tourism Port Authority, we have tourism officials bringing more airlift, etc. So it has to be a combined effort. So all I'm saying, sir, let us use the data to be better so that the country can benefit. Mr. Speaker, as I said previously, infrastructure and investment must not wait on an international or regional major event to happen. Barbados is owed the opportunity to have a beautiful, smooth road in Broad Street. They're owed that, they pay taxes for this. They are owed, we owe the vendors at, may I say Oystons, at Baxter's Road, in Dover, we owe them the decency to maintain their properties, or the property in which they're ranked from the government. We owe them this, sir, right? So let us not use these, as the Honorable Senator said, as a time to beat your chest up and so forth. There are entrepreneurs, and they deserve this decency, even outside. They should not have to wait another 15 years till World Cup comes around again, or another major event where we believe that tourists will come and patronize their establishments. So the place has to be spruced up, but all we're asking for is a clear and decent account of how the money is being spent. Today in the newspaper, sir, we received vendors have been removed. And again, when you hear the responses of the vendors, they understand that we want to clean up house, but there was no communication. And they're now, most of them, without the opportunity to have told customers that they'll be relocating, and they have to do that for 3 weeks, which will take them probably into June. They do not know if they'll be relocated back. In the other house, it was said, sir, that they will not be moved, and then it was said, sir, that they will be communicated in a timely manner, but it has not materialized. If we are a goal, and the government has been proactive, the government must be decent and communicate with the people of this country. Sir, the resurgence of cricket in Barbados is the #1 legacy benefit, and that has been stated by the chairman of the National Organizing Committee. It is the #1 legacy benefit. I draw your attention to a document that was prepared for the 2006-2007 World Cup, and it was headlined Legacy Barbados, the Legacy Vision for Barbados, making Barbados the #1 place to live, work, play, and invest. It is a nice document. I must say, it is a very nice document. I think it laid out 7 key concepts of what the then government wanted to get out of the cricket. And target area #3, sir, focused key objectives were cited: to develop cricket industry in Barbados, to increase participation in the national game, to nurture and support Barbados cricket talent, to ensure the right facilities are provided. So the government has laid out a plan, a BLP government in 2006-2007. They have returned to office, 6 years in office, and their relationship with the BCA, the main cricketing body, is to write down the debt that the government owes to the organization. $25 million over to the organization has been written down to $11 million, a cash, I believe it's a cash injection of $1 million, and $10 million in bonds. This is a party that wants to develop cricket in Barbados, that wants to increase participation in this national game, that wants to nurture and support Barbados cricketing culture, wants to ensure the right facilities are provided. But they write off $25 million over to the BCA, give them $1 million in cash, and put in $10 million in bonds. Then, to come now to borrow $25 million additional to say that they are going to play a major role in the resurgence of cricket. I don't know if that makes sense to these other senators on the other side, but it doesn't make sense to me. Sir, the BCA has not been spared the restructuring, or cricketing has not been spared the restructuring. That is a restructuring of their debt. We remember the national insurance, where we lost $1 billion. Persons were asked to pay more contributions. Persons were asked to work longer. Sir, I am saying to you that the legacy that the government is trying to achieve has not been put in a position that they can present a plan that we can buy in as Barbadians, that the cricketing fraternity, and I'm not here to defend or speak on their behalf, but that they should be able to say, we are happy that the government is doing A, B, C, D, and we were part of this development, and we think it can work. So the government, sir, must identify what they believe, but they have identified the legacy benefits that they would like to come out of this World Cup. They must put in place measurements and metrics so that we can see how we have performed. Because it is not only about a 6 and a 4 and who gets to the finals. It is about the resurgence of cricket. It's about our young boys are able to go out and play decent cricket, to develop their skills, and to become something of themselves. To go overseas, and girls, yes, to go overseas and represent a county club, to represent the country. We have Barbados playing in other national teams, even in this World Cup. So this is something that is very, very important to cricket. I agree, but we need to have to see the plan that says that the government knows what they are doing, that they actually do have a plan. So, sir, as I sum up, we support it. We support cricket being here. Barbados is a cricketing nation. You do not bring international cricket to the Caribbean and do not play at Kensington Oval. I understand that. We understand that. But the legacy of the cricket is not predicated on oysters. It is not predicated on flights in Kensington only. It has to be on a clear plan on the resurgence of cricket. And I think that a part of this conversation, sir, has to be, is it sufficiently organized? We have an organization called Kensington Oval Management, Inc., who is supposed to be responsible, from my understanding, for the marketing and the revenue generation of the facility. Then we have the Barbados Cricket Association, who's responsible for the pitch and the grounds. But how do you explain that you want to put cricket on the pinnacle, knowing its importance to Barbados, and you sometimes have a dilemma where you have to choose between a show and a cricket match? Are you aware, sir, that there is no local final that is played at Kensington Oval? no local final that is played. So you can imagine, I witnessed an under 17 cricket final a few months ago, which my son participated in, and it was played on a small ground. Where is the aspiration for our cricketers to say that they have played against the over in the final? What happens to the little boys that are looking on and aspiring to play against it as part of their cricketing journey? This is not about self or about party. This is about the future of our young men and our young girls. The ability for them to earn a living and send even for an exchange in Barbados. The ability for us not only to host matches, but to say to our locals that we are truly a cricketing nation. I've seen a tour of the trophy, is it? Going around, nice social media, etc. Where are the little cricket bats and balls in our communities? I have driven through St. Michael Northwest, and there's nobody batting or bowling in the road like in the old days. When they have international games, you used to get footballs, cricket balls, basket, whatever is happening. You would furnish the communities with some things so that the youngsters will participate. That is cricket. That is cricket. But we hear plans of community cricket. We hear plans in the budget of community cricket. But what the cricket needs to be sustainable is we need a strong schools cricket. That is what I am told. But sir, I do not know if the government wants to deflect from its current trajectory of its legacy. A legacy, sir, that is of borrowing, a legacy that is now of interest payments that almost meet the wage bill of the government, sir. A legacy that has runaway inflation for the last 6 years. The inability, sir, of a tourism ministry that is finding it difficult to get levels back up to pre-COVID levels when other jurisdictions have done so. Sir, a legacy of spending on excessive travel, sneaky deals behind the backs of citizens. We know about the COVID.
No, you please withdraw and move on.
Okay, sir. Sir, a legacy, a distraction of a legacy of things that Barbados are opposed to now. Sir, the 1,200 jobs that have been promised to the people of the residents of the city, we have not, I am told that they have not materialized as yet. I'm not sure if they are still in progress or in process. We hear about the volunteers that are needed. I would want to ask the government to follow through on this promise that it made nationally on the jobs and opportunities. I heard about some of the opportunities for the residents of the city, and I hope that all the opportunities that have been touted come to pass for them. But sir, we encourage Barbados and the Caribbean, and we, in terms of hosting, we wish our country well. We encourage Barbadians to participate when necessary, support our local vendors, come to the cricket matches, be on our best behavior, and let us show the world that we are a world-class destination. Sir, with those few words, I thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator Walters. Senator Mr. Maynard.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I apologize for being late because I arrived late, Mr. President. But it was in time to hear Senator Chantel's Morrow Knight's introduction of this bill. And while I'm not a biblical scholar, it drew me, sir, to St. Jerome's commentary, sir, on Paul's letter to the Ephesians. I'll read it, sir, in Latin, because I know that you'll understand it. It says, Noli equi dentes in spicere donati. It means, sir, never look a gift horse in the mouth. That's all I will say on one part of it, sir. If a horse is given to you just take it and be happy. I will continue, sir. Sir, the leader of this debate used some very powerful words. I heard socio-cultural makeup. This is all in reference to World Cup. Resilience, resistance, and emancipation. And it was the start of a discussion about the link between culture and cricket history. And that one, sir, is real. But sir, I look around this city of Bridgetown, sir, and I've heard reference today about legacy and what should be left after World Cup and how we will use it. And as I look across the bridge, sir, at the hoarding on the pier head, sir, I am pleased that finally that project, sir, has started, and the visitors to this country, sir, in the future might be able to visit our historic world-class crew dock and enjoy it. But sir, I have a few concerns about some of our legacy. And I want to refer to the Physical Development Plan of October 2023. And in the Physical Development Plan, sir, there's a section that speaks to archaeological resources. Sir, and I'm afraid that we might not, while we might have had documents that requires developers to preserve our archaeological heritage, I am not sure, sir, that we are enforcing it. Now, we all know, sir, that the pierhead, that little peninsula of land, was a place where ships docked, having sailed for 4,000 plus miles and many, many months. And it's the first place that our ancestors, some of them, laid their feet. And anytime you transport live cargo, sir, not all will survive. That possibility exists. And sir, it therefore means that there is the possibility that on that peninsula, there are important remains, sir, that are within the Physical Development Plan. There are plans, sir, and functions, sir, which government has undertaken to preserve them. Sir, and I wish in this Parliament to ask the Minister of Culture, sir, to please make sure that whatever is happening behind the hoarding will not destroy important archaeological relics, and particularly skeletal remains. I really, sir, really ask the Minister to make sure that the organizations tasked with preserving such things, the National Trust, the Office of the Chief Town Planner, and all the other appropriate agencies, and the police, make sure that if skeletal remains are present at that site, that they are appropriately protected and preserved. Now, sir, with regard to legacy, it is ironic that we will stand today to debate, as a cognate debate, a bill that includes the potential introduction of foreign police services. And we will only do that, I'm told, if it is deemed absolutely necessary. And it's excellent that we've made the plans in advance. And they've asked, what will be the legacy for our own Barbados Police Service? We will be spending significant sums of money in Oystins, a place where there's food and entertainment. And it dawned on me that when I visit our largest police complex, I noticed that, and this is no insult, sir, to the members of the Barbados Police Service, I noticed that our hardworking police officers, just as the birds fly down from the trees when the food truck pulls in, they too have to come down from upstairs to find food. And I've asked, with all the work that they will be doing, could part of this legacy involve the simple construction, sir, of a cafeteria at our largest police complex, so that all the hard-working policemen and women and civilians can find food in their place of work, just like at the Q8, sir, because they're both essential services and they run 24 hours a day. Oh, sir, the visitors to Barbados will enjoy some of our culture, some will be fun, but there will be some, sir, that will be serious business. I walked a little bit in Bridgetown recently, and I saw or restored, I didn't go inside, or restored Jewish synagogue. An incredible piece of work and restoration. And sir, I'm pleased that the name of the gentleman who was, I would say, the major player, sir, in that restoration is involved with the Pierhead project. And I am warm to think that he, sir, will pay the same level of attention to detail with what happens on the Pierhead in terms of cultural preservation. So from that point of view, sir, I am assured, but I like to think that our government needs to make sure that the people who are tasked with doing their jobs are doing them. Now, Mr. President, 200 yards from the Pierhead, or thereabouts, there's a wall that most of us, I think, looked at for the first time when we had the opening of the square. And I have some colleagues here from Ghana, and a few of them have told me personally that they have gone to the wall and have seen their names with great pleasure. And they have all said that seeing their names made them realize that they may be visiting Barbados, but they were already here. Their bloodline is not new. It's been here for a long time and they didn't know. And I think that if nothing happens from World Cup, that we have to make sure that we do not allow, sir, the excavated materials that will come from the Pierhead to be dumped in a quarry somewhere and destroy cultural heritage. Sir, that's my entire contribution, and I thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator Maynard. Senator Nichols.
Mr. President, I am indeed grateful to contribute to the debate on the bill before the chamber today. Sir, I was saying from the outset that I've heard contributions here and in the other place, and the discussion about World Cup generally has provoked a lot of topical and conversation about the staging of the ICC World Cup. Now, behind the Olympic Games and the FIFA World Cup, Cricket World Cup is the third largest sporting event in the world. And I think that when we go outside of Barbados, we begin to be appreciative of the coveted position that Barbados is in. Last weekend, I happened to participate in the CARICOM Cricket Symposium, in which the entire Caribbean came together to discuss the resurgence of West Indies cricket. And there was almost a wide consensus of views that cricket is important to the fabric and the social fabric of the Caribbean society. It is our greatest endeavor. Our greatest citizens, global citizens, are cricketers. And the biggest contributions that we have made in an international stage have been exemplified by our cricketers. And a lot of what we have lost is the connection between what the cricketers did on the field as an inspiration to us as a society and as a people, but also their own political and social economic missions to revolutionize the societies from which they came. And a lot of that connection has been lost, and I think the overwhelming consensus from that symposium last week was that we need really to teach young people about cricket and its place in Caribbean society. Sir Larry Constantine, I go back to his autobiography in 1933, Cricket and I, when he said cricket is the most glaring example of a black man being kept in his place. And that is the first thing we have to change. So that this one of the first great West Indian cricketers of the 20th century was did not only have a mission to play the game, play it well, and excel on the cricket field, but understood the place of cricket within the development of the West Indian society, especially the work he did of opening up the opportunities to black Caribbean people in Britain and organizing cricket in England, for which he was elevated to the House of Lords at some later date. But we understand the enduring mission of cricket and its role. Sir, I am happy that this World Cup is coming to the country again. And I'm not understanding why we are the envy of the international world. Barbados is known for its cricket. And the ICC's World Cup final is being held not for the third time, as I'm hearing bandied about, but for the fourth time. Because in 2010, there were 2 World Cup finals on the same day, women's and men's. So this will now be the 4th final in Barbados. You can't imagine a final in England not at Lords. They couldn't find a final in Australia outside the MCG, and one in India at Evening Gardens, but now with the Modi Stadium, you understand that would have taken out from the people in the Evening Gardens Stadium in Chennai. But this marks it is so fantastic that we don't want to say we don't have any competition, but it is settled that you will have a World Cup final in Barbados. But sir, I want to remind the chamber that in 2014-15, I think it was, the West Indies hosted a World Cup. And the government of the day decided that it will not bid for any World Cup matches because it had no benefit to the country. So to hear my good friend Senator Walters scoff at the treatment that government might be paying to cricket and the resurgence and the development of cricket, I want to remind him that before he was a member of the Democratic Labour Party, that the Democratic Labour Party told the country that it had no interest in World Cup because it made no sense to them at the time. And all the government had to do is to do what we're doing here. Pass legislation, sunset legislation that will come into place to make provision so that the bid requirements in the ICC bidding process can be met and its guarantees in terms of immigration, security, and those things are met, and also for the development and the continuing upgrade of the facility. But you know why that opportunity was a missed opportunity? Because it was the first standalone women's cricket World Cup. Our women, led by the great Barbadian Hayley Matthews, are doing us proud on the international cricket scene. And what a fillip it would have been if all of the young girls in this country would have been able to specifically come out to a World Cup for women where we can now focus on the women's game, which is growing and which is bringing pride and joy to several Caribbean people as we speak. She's now on the ICC top ranked T20 cricketer. Coming from Barbados, which young woman outside of Rihanna has been able to bring international acclaim? We are doing it in the sport of cricket. And this is not just a bystander thing. This is something that makes a lot of money for people as a profession. So that I come to the debate, Mr. President, conscious of the fact that we in the cricket fraternity never like to make political footballs out of the cricket. We kept silent. We kept quiet when the government did not support the BCA in the bid for the Women's World Cup. We didn't come out and make it a national political issue. But we understood the benefits to the women's game because Barbados was the dominant women's team in the region. The Barbados women's team, sir, in 2022, represented the entire West Indies region at the Commonwealth Games. And by that metric alone, Mr. President, when cricket goes to the the Olympics in 2028 and 2032, we stand a very good chance of being one of the first female teams competing at the Olympics in cricket, Mr. President. How do we get there? This is not something that we can afford to pay lip service to or to put in a political stadium to play football between the two competing political parties. Well, I dare say I don't feel that the other side has much to shout about. But at the same time, we in the cricket fraternity do not believe that cricket can be descended into the chaos of the politics of the country. Sir, I've heard a lot of questions about we want to see a plan for cricket. And in order to justify this expenditure, the government must come out and put a plan for cricket. Mr. President, cricket is live and well in Barbados. And you just have to walk around this country and observe. You have to pick up in the press and on social media. There are several cricket competitions being played as we speak, and even outside of the confines of the Barbados Cricket Association. We recently launched in this country, not the BCA, Mr. President, a BIM T20, a BIM T10, a new tournament, private sector run. Cricketers being paid salaries to play in a competition last year for the first time in Barbados, outside of the Barbados Cricket Association. And when we talk about young people, I have a son, Mr. President, who plays cricket and wants to be a cricketer. Nothing of my doing, I would prefer him to do something else, but that is his choice. But you know what? The difference is that when I was at that age, we had to concentrate on academics. But we now have a different society that can accept that being a sports person could be a laudable profession, and in cricket. Sir, Senator Walters spoke about we need to put more emphasis in the schools. If you look at the fixtures for the Barbados Cricket Association season, domestic season, that is now on the way, the schools are saying that the schedule is too packed because they're the age group competitions in all the age cohorts, under 19, under 17, under 15, under 13, under 11. And there are also private competitions competing for space in the local calendar every year. The Herman Griffith competition is done for the primary schools. But the primary school students also play mixed with the students in the junior level in the secondary schools in the Everton Weeks under 13 competition. And then there's the under 15 competition. But this has nothing to do, and the under 19 competition. And this has nothing to do with the local cricket played and the domestic leagues among clubs and schools in the domestic season. Now, what we have to do, Mr. President, is to have a sober look at where our cricket is and where it needs to go. And one of the things that the government has recognized and said, look, we can't be talking about taking cricket forward and we don't have an indoor facility. The old Armstrong building at Kensington Oval, Mr. President, was earmarked as part of the development of Kensington Oval when it was redeveloped for World Cup in 2007. And for 10 years, sir, the BCA has been asking government to release that facility so we can have an indoor facility. Nothing. And we came to office, sir, to fix these anomalies in the system. Yes, we had COVID and we had to do the adjustments. The mission critical didn't allow the government the fiscal space to do these things. We are doing them now as we are getting back on our feet. Mr. President, I want to say, without being controversial or courting controversy, I was gobsmacked when I heard my fellow senator suggest that the BCA got a raw deal in the debt restructuring. And I don't know him to be a fellow that will play a short hand. But the country must be told the full truth and nothing but the truth. Kensington Oval was redeveloped for World Cup in 2007. And there was an ongoing uneasiness between the members of the Barbados Cricket Association, to whom the ownership in Kensington Oval resided, and government which acquired large parcels of land and redeveloped the facility. So there was a joint ownership. That was settled in 2008 and 9 under the last Democratic Labour Party administration with a lease which would pay at least $1.2 million a year annually to the BCA for the use of its property at Kensington Oval. So the $25 million debt that Senator Walker spoke of was debt that was the lease payment to the Barbados Cricket Association that the Democratic Labour Party for 10 years refused to pay. Not a penny, Mr. President, for the use, while the BCF had to forego its revenue for gate receipts for its own cricket and international cricket at Kensington Oval. Now, we came to a position, sir, when Trinidad started to beat us and started to push up themselves in about 2006, 2007, after the Stanford period. And we recognized that the government of Trinidad was putting money to pay their cricketers. Mr. President, amateurs cannot beat professionals. A fellow who breaking off a job and leaving at 4 o'clock to get down to Kensington Oval to practice cannot beat somebody who goes to work playing cricket as his job. And we recognize we lost the corporate support. I've said in here many times, banks done with cricket, BT done with cricket, Cable Wireless, Texaco done, Vivix done. You know, we recognize that we have lost the corporate support for this game that we had in the past. Sagicor that used to sponsor the entire domestic white ball game and limited overs game, not in sponsorship anymore. I'm not calling out these companies because they want to make examples of them, but there has been a big shift away from the investment in sport and in the sport of cricket at the same time, Mr. President. And we see all of this. But how do we get young people interested in this game? This is a global game. There are 3 Barbadians now on the West Indies team announced moments ago. 3. We would like more. But how are we going to be able to compete in the international T20 arena if we come here to divide ourselves politically about cricket? And suggest that there's an indifference to this game of cricket and peeping up behind yourselves. Young people don't want to hear all of that. Young people don't want to hear the bluster and the political noise about who do this and who that in cricket. They're not interested in that, Mr. President. The entire world is coming here. I'm glad to come here. And we are having an in-house fight as if there's some prize to get about who do the most for cricket. Mr. President, who do the most for cricket? One of the first things the Democratic Labour Party did in 2008 in its first budget, the late David Thompson, Mr. President, was to increase the taxes on the BCA's cricket lottery to make it inoperable on the video lottery terminals, and rewarded the one-armed bandits operators a level of government-protected competition that prevented the BCA from rolling out its own revenue stream to pay cricketers and give them contracts, and to send those cricketers to England and Australia for training and to play in those domestic leagues and develop and expand this game. 349 machines for 10 years, Mr. President. And you know what? The BCA and the lottery operator got one of the first times I've ever seen it, an injunction to prevent government from collecting the tax. And the court granted the injunction in 2009 to stop the government from putting on the tax that the Thompson administration had imposed on the BCA in its first budget. And you know what? All the money doesn't go to the BCA because under the lottery agreement brokered by the late Wayne Arthur, who reduced the tax and induced the Olympic Association, the Turf Club, the BCA to join and merge one national lottery. So you reduce the tax from 12% to 3% on the lottery so that all the sporting organizations benefit. And Mr. Arthur insisted that the National Sports Council should now come to the table and take its place among those other three sporting entities. So there were four. So the National Sports Council no benefits from that arrangement. But the first thing Mr. Thompson did is to raise the tax to 20% and kill off the venture of the video lottery terminals. Mr. President, I can say to this day that the Barbados Labour Party came to office, and in 2018, we amended the Betting Gaming Duties Act, reduced that tax, and that has poured millions of dollars into the sporting organizations of Barbados. And the BCA revenues have grown by millions of dollars, and even during COVID, Mr. President, when everything was closed down, the BCA didn't have to stop paying those young cricketers that monthly salary of contracted players. And I can say, Mr. President, without that legislative policy intervention, we would not have been able, as a sporting body in this country, be able to have professional athletes competing on the international stage. We have two Barbadians in the England team. They would have started out playing at the same schools that Senator Walker's talked about. In this country, played for Barbados at all levels. They've had the opportunity, Mr. President, to go elsewhere and play in England. Long may that occur. Because the Barbadian talent cannot be constrained, in my respectful view, to just making a West Indies team. If we are going to produce cricketers, and we are known for the production of cricketers, let the Barbadian cricketers fill all the international spaces in the world. That is my own personal philosophy, Mr. President. But, you know, as Michael Holding said, the great Michael Holding said last week, you have to have cash to care. We can't care about cricket and not develop the facility at Kensington Oval beyond its original redevelopment in 2008. Mr. President, in 2008, you had a rope with cardboard boxes with advertisements draped on these outside of those boxes on the boundary. No, the boundaries you will see at Kensington will be like when you're watching football, the screens showing you all the advertisements and so forth. That is where the game has gone. The lights at Kensington Oval, Mr. President, you know, they talk about money spent at Kensington Oval, but the Democratic Labour Party spent over $20 million to complete the development at Kensington Oval in 2008 and 2009 in anticipation of the 2010 World Cup because we didn't have lights. Because in 2007, when the World Cup was played, Mr. President, the times that the games were being played were suited toward the Indian market, so we were not going to have night games. We did not have any night games in 2007. Well, you keep talking and talking, but when you interrupt, you know you got the nation to protect you, right? Right. So in 2007, right? In 2007, none of the games were scheduled as night games. Yes, the final went to late tonight, fine, but that has nothing to do with the government of Barbados. Those are two international umpires dealing with the rain and rain adjustments. But in 2008, 9, the Democratic Labour Party spent $20 million to further develop Kensington over to get it ready for the World Cup. So this indifference, let her keep talking. I don't mind her. I don't mind her. $20 million. But they would give you the impression that they have never had to do anything at Kensington Oval. Right? Never had anything to do. So that when the World Cup games I'll focus. And that is why lights were not in. But we've gone past that, Mr. President. We now have to concentrate now on things like dropping pitches and using the technology, how to dry the ground and these kind of things, because the technology has changed, it has rapidly evolved. So that the investment in this opportunity, and Mr. President, you know, we can scoff at it. But we know when cricket is on island, what it does to this Barbados economy. You can't get a rental car, you can't go in a restaurant to get anywhere. The transport board makes nothing but money in these periods of times. Sir, since the redevelopment of Kensington Oval, England has never come to the Caribbean and not stopped here to play cricket as part of their tour. And there are venues in Jamaica, St. Kitts, Antigua, Dominica, St. Lucia, St. Vincent, Grenada, Trinidad, and Guyana. We even playing West Indies matches in Florida. So we compete with all these other venues, but the English always come here. Why, sir? 2007, 2008, 2009, 2015, 2017, 2019, 2021, and 2022. Mr. President, yesterday, the West Indies, Cricket West Indies announced that there'll be one ODI and two T20s between the 6th to the 10th of November this year, the English coming back again. The English are coming back again, and we understand the contribution to the Barbadian economy. So when we start to talk about cricket and it's, sir, it is time we also start to have a serious conversation with the CPL, because we have the facility here. I'm not saying that they should have the funnels in Guyana every year, but the CPL will come to Barbados at some point in time. We need to have a conversation with the CPL and the Barbados Royals and start to build out that momentum for CPL cricket, because regional people travel to the CPL, which is the biggest party in sport. I am not talking about some far-fetched thing, Mr. President, like when they're bringing the fellas on the parachutes to land them on the garrison for the 50th anniversary and they end up in the sea. And in the Bayland, miss the whole garrison. I don't understand. To bring parachuters, you celebrate our 50th anniversary by bringing parachuters. One landing a tree down by the beach and one landing in Bayland. Miss the whole garrison. We're talking about something, the game of cricket, Mr. President. We're talking about the game of cricket. That scores of people come here to participate in the Gary Sobers tournament. Languished, Mr. President, for many years without proper support from the Barbados Tourism Authority under the last administration. Schools from all over the world, Australia, England, the Caribbean, come in the slowest period of the year to pay tribute to our national hero. In that tournament. I played it in that tournament, sir, as a schoolboy. And the Grenadians have now taken that idea, and last year they had a junior Murray tournament with schools going on for England, and we didn't have a Gary Sobers tournament in Barbados. You imagine that, Mr. President? So that our relationship with cricket, let us take the politics out of it. Let us understand and appreciate that when West Indies win, the entire fabric of this Caribbean family is a different vibe. We operate differently, we feel differently. When we lose, as Paul King Douglas said, Tanti Merle get loose in the oval. And Bajans of a certain village understand that reference, even though Tanti Merle and Paul King Douglas are not from Barbados, but we're part of one Caribbean family. So, Mr. President, I don't understand all of these things. And sir, when you speak about this debt, this NIS debt that Senator Walters referred to, Mr. President, I want to touch on it a little bit. You know that this $1 billion that they're saying that was written off is the $1 billion that the Democratic Labour Party took from people's salaries in statutory corporations and the government refused to pay any NIS. That had the country facing debt service payments when we came to office, that the country could not afford, that risked the devaluation of the Barbadian dollar, that the debt restructuring halted and was able to give us the financial space to do all of the things that they say they cannot be done. Like the roads that are being done, that they say being done for World Cup. Well, sir, I fish the Barbados Labour Party in office all the time and they have World Cups coming. Because without us having World Cup in 2008 and 2007, they criticized us when we built the roads. They're doing it again. But in between them, they had 10 years they building the roads and they told the country potholes.
To save lives.
Yeah, will save lives and you got to deal with those inconveniences. You imagine them? You imagine them speaking and criticizing these things? Let us move beyond that. Let us build a national consensus about how we will get cricket to where it needs to be and how we can mirror those advantages that we have enjoyed in other sports. How do we professionalize football and volleyball and netball and cricket, and volleyball and road tennis? Using the model of cricket, how do we infuse the methodologies that we have used to anchor this national sport for those persons who don't play or are fortunate enough to play in cricket? Road tennis, Mr. President, at the World Cup will be a fantastic thing in the party zone. We understand that. And the fan zones introduce a lot of people to this sport. This is what we have to do to build out the orange and blue, the orange economy. Culture and the creative elements of the society. So that, don't say that you are supporting cricket and come and give the impression that you want to know what is well. Mr. President, the occasion will come and the opportunity will come when I can speak about the hundreds and the scores of Barbadians who are on scholarships at secondary schools in England. Senator Morris, as a former Deputy High Commissioner, will tell you, and some of them, a lot of them are there through private initiatives. Cricket is a way of life in our society. So you want to support the World Cup and these bills, but I ain't so sure if you fuck up. That is what Malik said. You support it, but I ain't so sure if you fuck up.
They laugh at it. Everybody.
So that we must stop politicizing the game of cricket. We are on this side are proud, Mr. President, to support in the right way, do the things that government wants to do. And the fact that we can put these bills together with it, as the Honorable Minister said, within the 9 months period when the finals were announced. We had 2.5 years before, but all of the infrastructure to put these security arrangements in place is one of the biggest legacy benefits of World Cup 2007. And that is why Barbados can safely put in a bid and get whatever bid that I have identified as a strategy. We got 2 bid packages in this World Cup, the England group and the finals. It wasn't one bid. How can you manage that? The ability to outbid New York, Dallas, Florida, and all the other Caribbean territories. That is the legacy. It can be measured in tourism numbers in June of this month and that kind of superficial analysis. That is the legacy benefit, Mr. President. our capacity to organize and to be able to do it in a short period of time and pull it off to our credit. So, Mr. President, I want to conclude my remarks in this debate by letting the country know that, yes, we have taken into the consideration all of the elements of the opposition's arguments, and we have heard what the people are saying. We will not get everything right, and we will not please everybody, Mr. President. Nobody can do that. But certainly, there is a buzz about the World Cup. I'm not saying that manna will rain from heaven after the World Cup, but we must stop paying lip service to the greatest endeavor of the Caribbean society that we have participated in it and done so well. Mr. President, I'm obliged to you.
Thank you very much, Senator Nichols. Any more speakers on this matter? If not, I'd invite Senator Watson.
Good morning, Mr. President. Good morning to other members of the Senate. Mr. President, I want to talk this morning in considering these bills on sharing the burden and reaping the benefit, the bounty. Now, Cricket World Cup games in Barbados are not new. So we know this. We know that we've hosted aspects of the tournament before. In fact, the chamber would be maybe interested to know that in a previous life, as an employee of Cable Waters Barbados Limited, I was the local project manager for everything that the company did in relation to Cricket World Cup 2007, sponsorship, engineering, sales, marketing, the whole hog. Therefore, I have a fairly intimate knowledge of what occurred before that tournament, during that tournament, and after that tournament. In fact, I could tell Senator Nichols that the issue with lights wasn't just that we thought there would be day games. The government failed at that time in the redevelopment of Kensington, and it was extensive, to include lights. And I know that we played in the dark because I was there, because my team of 120-something members could not leave Kensington Oval until at least an hour after matches were finished, because we had to service the people who were working in the Oval from a telecommunications perspective. So I understand. And so I also understand where we did not reap benefits from the $200 million spent in Cricket World Cup. I was interested because I was involved. I was interested as a citizen, particularly because I was involved. And so I understand that what has been said about legacy benefits is not only about whether we could put in a bid to host Cricket World Cup. It is also about all of the other things that were contained in the legacy document and proposals, including environmental benefits for Barbados, including being able to develop and keep and publish metrics for the benefits that would devolve from the staging of an event like this. Today, we have talked at a very high level, and the government in the debate in the other place and here has talked at a very high level about benefits, but has not quantified those benefits. Because they are not quantifiable, because we have not kept the data. We can talk about a bump in tourism arrivals in a particular month, but we cannot show how it has benefited our overall tourism development. This is a fact, Mr. President, but I will go on. Now, while some members may only have been spectators, there are those of us having been involved that can bring a laser-like focus on the real issues that occur to Barbadians, not patting ourselves on the back as members of government because we have been able to achieve a loan and can spend some money on organize something that we've done twice before, so there's no point bragging about it. We're experts now. We know this. And so the real issue for the average Barbadian is, what is the benefit to me? Many of whom, of course, cannot afford to go into the stadium, so that's not a benefit to cite. And so we must be able to examine the true benefits to us. Burden of $50 million at an interest rate of 7%. On top of what we're continuing to pay from the $200 million that we incurred in debt for the previous ICC CWC World Cup in 2007. The alleged benefits, Mr. President, were the biggie, tourism. Senator Walters has already given some figures here today about where we actually did not see a knock-on benefit in increased tourism. But what we note is that there's a continued focus in the metrics on arrivals. And we are not linking the arrivals metrics to spend in Barbados. In fact, one noted economist in Barbados, in fact more than one, has said specifically that we do not see the spillover effects of tourism in Barbados. That has been said time and time again. And what is more, we cannot show the numbers. No one is reporting on what is the spend from cruise tourism. People land, they go get on a boat, they're on a boat, they come on the island, get on a plane, they're counted. We know that what they have spent for that transport is in the ticket that they paid for outside of Barbados, Mr. President. That money is not touching here. We also know, Mr. President, it's been said time and time again, that a lot of the value add for tourism happens outside of Barbados. A lot of the value add. And their metrics are also indicate that tourism is notoriously a low earning job for most of the people who are in that sector. Second only to agriculture in Barbados, Mr. President. So when we talk about this, about the increases in tourism, we know that it is short-term, very short-term as a matter of fact. And I dare say in Barbados, today, in 2024, it will be shorter term than we normally will observe because right after Cricket World Cup is what? Crop over. So whatever we see in July and August, we would have seen anyway. So we will not be able to rely on that. And what Barbadians are asking for, they've been asking for years, is that we develop the metrics and demonstrate to Barbadians that what we invest in tourism, when we invest this kind of money, the $50 million that we can, and tout tourism benefits, we can actually show those tourism benefits. And I'm going to reiterate, can we have the data? Can we have the data that shows the economic benefits to Barbados after Cricket World Cup 2007, beyond tourism, the tourism boost the following month? And can we see the data that shows the benefits to Barbados after the hosting of the T20 tournament in 2010? Can we see the data? The only entity that owns that data is the government of Barbados. The rest of us can't get it. There's no point in coming and telling us that there are benefits, but you cannot quantify those benefits. That's really important to the people of Barbados. You know, there seems to be an expectation that only economists are interested in this stuff or can understand it. But if you listen to Barbadians, Barbadians are asking time and time again, can we get the data? That's what I would ask for. That was supposed to be a legacy benefit from 2007 Cricket World Cup, Mr. President. It ought to be available now. The analysis ought to be developed, and it should be a legacy benefit from this. It's not that hard. It's about collecting the data and analyzing and publishing the data. So we have no data for 2007 Cricket World Cup benefits, spillover benefits, and we have no projections of spillover benefits from 2024 Cricket World Cup. I'm not talking about euphemisms and pretty language. I'm talking about hard data, and that's what ought to come out of this, so that the next time we decide we're going to not just bid, but incur debt that Barbadians have to pay, that they will be paying for years onward, that we can justify to Barbadians that the debt incurred has sufficient benefit to justify incurring that debt. Mr. President, sharing the bounty, sharing the burden. Another burden that is going to visit itself upon us if the Barbados Light and Power has its way is that there will be an increase in electricity rates within a few weeks. $3.17 on average, plus taxes paid on that. It adds up to $3.48 bus fare. So it has a tangible impact on many people in our society. It's a can of tuna, it's vegetables, it's some fruit. But because Barbados Light and Power can say, oh look, Cricket World Cup, we'll come and ask for some extra money and give us through the fuel clause adjustment, even though you'll be paying for fuel as well. An additional burden to Barbadians. The Barbados Light and Power will say,
On a matter of order. A point of order, sorry.
Point of order.
A point of order, Mr. President. I believe the Honourable Senator is litigating a matter before it's even being pronounced. She's suggesting that the government will come or the FTC will come and ask for an increase in electricity when the issue has not even been fully brought to bear, Mr. President. And I am still trying to find out then how this issue of the electricity rates coincides with the debate that we are having, Mr. President.
I'm giving the Senator some latitude, as I have done to everyone, if they think that it is not finding itself anchored in bat or ball, then I will pull stumps. So I'm just waiting. Senator Watson, please make your linkage so that I don't have to pull stumps.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, Madam Senator should listen to me carefully. There is an application. I'm speaking to what has been sought in the application. I did not say a decision. I said if they're successful, in short order, that is what is going to happen. And the fact is, the company has cited Cricket World Cup as a basis for making the application, Mr. President. That is also a fact. Mr. President, the point is, we are looking at potentially additional costs, because all we're talking about here is potential. We don't know how many people are going to come. We don't know how much money they're going to spend. So we're talking about potential. And so potentially there will be that increased rate to Barbadians, and the impetus for it, stated by the company, is in part Cricket World Cup 2024. Now, Mr. President, burden of $50 million at 7%. And we hear legacy, 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 legacy. But we can't understand what the legacy is beyond a lot of long talk. And we can look back. I've said this before. So this is not something new. Anybody can scoff at it, but the fact is we have heard this before and we cannot see the tangible benefits. We're bragging about putting lights in Kensington, but we rebuilt that stadium practically from scratch. Only a couple of stands remain standing. And it was this Barbados Labour Party government, no, I can't say this because the people are different, the Barbados Labour Party government that redeveloped Kensington. So how do you pat yourself on the back for making that error and having to correct it now? It was an error. Thank heavens they're correcting it now, Mr. President. But surely also if you're saying you're going to use it as a venue, and that was the legacy benefit, that was a stated legacy benefit in 2007, that it would be used as a venue for events and it would earn income in that way, but you put no lights up. And so Barbadians are right to scoff at the prospect of legacy because it was not realized before, and we have no evidence that it will be realized now.
Mr. President, I raise on a point of order. The Honourable Senator is misleading the chamber. She is in fact correct that lights were erected after the World Cup. But Mr. President, I'm sure you were part of the government and will recall that the costs of that component was taken out of the project when the ICC indicated that lights, none of the games will require lights for the matches. In fact, Mr. President, lights during day matches were not even approved in 2007. So even if we had the lights, the error of the umpires in 2007 and allowing the final to continue under that period would not have been able to use under the existing ICC regulations. And the Honourable Senator must either acquaint herself with the rules of cricket or stop misleading the chamber.
Thank you, Senator Nichols. You're correct. Press on, Senator Watson.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, let me correct Senator Nichols. I did not say anything about why money was taken out. I'm saying it ought to have been done. There is no good reason. I don't want to hear about ICC when we're talking about sovereign Barbadian matters, matters that will benefit Barbadians. So what if ICC says we don't need it for a match in the day? Barbados' government has to make a decision about what is necessary for Barbadians. We can't talk republic and sovereignty and we are punching above our weight and we are a leader in world affairs and then we let a sporting organization tell us how to develop our stadium. Senator Nichols stuns me when he makes that comment. That was not even worth commenting on because it was up to the government of Barbados to make that determination and they made it and they made the wrong decision then. But I don't want to dwell on that. I'm talking about the legacy. We heard about the legacy in 2005, 2006, 2007. We're hearing about it again. And what I'm saying to the government of Barbados is that the legacy must be real and it must be appreciable. It must be measurable and measured and reported to the people of Barbados, lest you come again to put the burden of significant loans on the people to have to repaying 20 years on, and they cannot see the legacy benefits. It can't be pie in the sky stuff. Mr. President, we also know that when we talk about the benefits, we want the benefits to be long-term economic benefits. But we are staging this tournament, and the Democratic Labour Party is not opposed to staging the tournament. We, the Democratic Labour Party that y'all are obsessed with, that's the one. The Democratic Labour Party is concerned that when the government of Barbados comes to Barbadians and says, you have to pay the cost of this, that the Barbadians, the average fellow, can see the benefits, can stop hearing about trickle down and can see that there are real tangible benefits to Barbadians. You know, Mr. President.
Please let the senator be heard.
I recognize that the members on the government side get uneasy over this issue. Uneasy. That's hysterical laughter that we hear from Senator Nichols. It comes from fear because they cannot answer the questions that are raised by Barbadians and they get very focused on the speaker and don't listen to the message. The message is coming from Barbadians. Barbadians are saying, what's up with this? And we hear about the excitement. We understand that on match day there's excitement, but there are a great many Barbadians. The vast majority will be sitting down in their homes saying, well, I still have to go to the supermarket. Inflation, the central bank governor pointed to it. He said it is still high, 4.8%. Every time you walk into the supermarket, week on week, prices increasing. That is reality for the people of Barbados, and they will ask this question, and nobody in the chamber can deny this. They will ask this question, how did it benefit me? What's in it for me? They will say to the government of Barbados, some of you might recognize this, what have you done for me lately? Of course the roads are supposed to be smoother, they're supposed to be fixed. That is nothing to brag about, and Cricket World Cup should not have been the impetus because it means that we are doing it to impress people who do not belong here, who are going to come for a short period and leave, Mr. President. So when we talk about the burden of the loan, we want to understand the benefits. Here are some of the benefits that we will not realize. The government of Barbados, and it's set out in the legislation that we're considering today, the government of Barbados will earn no tax revenue from staging CWC 2024, except for the people who are ordinarily resident in Barbados. So all of the teams, officials, management, no taxes on anything that they import or earn in Barbados. This is a fact. Barbadians will say, but why can't we earn in that way, Mr. President? This is not anything for, yes, I understand that it is an international tournament, but I am pointing out these things to point out that the benefits that Barbadians will probably be imagining we will gain are not there, they are not real. Mr. President, taxation, that is how government earns money. Government doesn't earn money from staging effect. Government earns money from tax revenues. And therefore, you should be able to draw a line between this is what we are spending and this is what we are earning. We will earn no revenue on ticket sales, Mr. President. Not importations, not ticket sales, not monies earned by anyone associated with the tournament who comes into Barbados to work. But perhaps that's ordinary, but the point is that's the reality. And Barbadians need to understand it when they assess whether there is a benefit to the cost of what we are going to spend to stage cricket, Mr. President. That is very important stuff for Barbadians to know, just so they know. On burdens, Mr. President, we have to look at the other bill that we're considering, because in the main, we have not talked about that bill. But that's the bill relating to visiting members from visiting police forces and what is extended to them. Now, perhaps there was an explanation offered for why we would have them on the ground working as part of the Barbados Police Force, and I'm not going to question that. What I will say is this: Barbadians need to understand that there are immunities extended to visiting members of police forces that are not members of the Barbados Police Force. Powers of arrest, Mr. President, that's serious stuff. The ability to operate exactly as Barbadian police operate. Immunity from prosecution for any criminal act. And that if they commit a tort, a civil wrong, cause injury or loss to a Barbadian, that will be treated as though the Barbados government committed that wrong. That means we, the taxpayers, will pay for any losses suffered. We can't gloss over that act because that act is a very serious one. Perhaps necessary, but we need to understand the implications for the people of Barbados so that Barbadians need to also understand how these people will work on the ground. How do we identify them? Because we will be looking for our police to be in a Barbados police uniform or to have identification. But when someone flashes other identification at you, Barbadians will say, well, who's you? You can't tell me nothing. And Barbadians need, I'm saying this because Barbadians need to understand. This legislation is not unusual. It existed
Mr. President, I raise on a point of
2007.
order.
What's the point of order?
The Honorable Senator is misleading the chamber. The legislation is not intended for foreign police to patrol the streets, to be flashing badges, to stop Barbadians from intercepting Barbadians as they move, or people generally. This is an international World Cup, Mr. President. We have people from all over the world, and we must recognize that there is an international criminal threat. And the only way we can be able to effectively police those threats and secure the safety of everybody here is if we work with our partners. Impacts Barbados and all of the other policing agencies and state agencies that work. The Barbados Police Service cannot by itself keep the entirety of the people coming to the World Cup safe without collaboration by international forces who have to work in Barbados. So to give the impression that you will see a policeman from New Zealand or India or anywhere flashing a badge telling Barbadians and directing traffic is an unfortunate implication that is being intentionally drawn by the Senator to mislead the chamber, Mr. President.
Yes, President Senator Watson.
Mr. President, Senator Nichols probably feels aggrieved that he did not spend a little time on this bill, that being what is before the chamber and not the development of cricket. I shall read the provisions for Senator Nichols' edification so that he understands precisely what the Act says. It says at clause 7(1), any member of a visiting police force who is sent to Barbados to perform police duties similar to duties performed by him in his state during Cricket World Cup 2004 shall, while on duty in Barbados, perform the same duties under and in accordance with the directions of the Commissioner in the same manner and in all respects as if he were a member of the public service. I shall go on that there is no restriction, Mr. President. That is the point, and Senator Nichols would understand that. In suggesting that I am misleading the chamber, he is misleading the chamber. Subsection 2, Mr. President, subject to this act, members of a visiting police force shall have the same rights, powers, privileges, and immunities as are conferred by law on members of the police service as may be necessary for performance of their duties. There is no delineation of those duties, no prescription, no restriction. That means that they could be asked to do any duty that is performed by a member of the Barbados Police Service. That is a fact. And what I'm saying, because members of the chamber, not the independent senators listen. The government senators don't listen. They sit poised to interrupt. What is important...
Senator Watson, you cannot go there. You're not in a position to determine who listens and who doesn't listen. It reflects negatively on the honorable members of the Honorable Senate, and you will withdraw that comment and move on.
I would apologize, Mr. President.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. President, Senator Nichols is wrong. I just read it. That is indisputable. What is important is that Barbadians understand that this will come into law and they will be subject to it. It existed before. It is not new. We did this for 2007. What I'm saying is that a lot of people will not understand how it will operate, and they have to be told how it will operate. But I reiterate the burden. Potentially, if there is damage caused to property or person by any of these visiting people, that too will be a burden for the people of Barbados. So when we talk about the benefits, we must be clear. We must be clear on the burdens that Barbadians can potentially suffer. They at least ought to know. I mean, maybe they're unavoidable, but they at least ought to be told. There ought to be transparency. That is the watchword of the government. Transparency and inclusion, and Barbadians ought to know. Mr. President, Barbadians therefore must be given the relevant information. I won't be much longer. Here's what Barbadians need to be told. Barbadians need to be told the rules that will apply during Cricket World Cup. Now, in the 2 years before Cricket World Cup 2007, the government had a long run-up. It took it and it informed the people. I can say that. This is correct. There was a lot of discussion about ambush marketing and what you could wear into the stadium and all of that kind of thing. And we don't have that amount of time. It hasn't happened yet. And that means that we have 2 months. And the government needs to spend some time and effort to inform Barbadians about the rules that will apply, rules related to marketing, rules related to conduct in and around the venues, and the venues will be multiple venues. Any venue where a Cricket World Cup activity is hosted will have the same rules applying to it. So we can't just say Kensington. And Barbadians need to be made to understand so that they too can manage and protect themselves when it comes to how they move around our country and attend events and participate in the activities. And we thank the government for having inclusive activities. That's important so that people can feel that it's is for them also, not just the few names that were called by Senator Chantal Moreau-Knight, but all of Barbadians. And all of Barbadians need to know what rules will apply to how they do what they do between now and June the 30th, 2024. Mr. President, Barbadians will continue to carry the burden of this loan. And we can see that it can stretch for years hence. And so the important thing, the agreement having been signed, but Barbadians don't get to say yeah or nay in relation to that, is that government has to move beyond trickle down and be able to get Barbadians to have ownership in these developments, shareholding in these entities that benefit from this expenditure, and that perhaps when we're making these arrangements, there can be something more that we can carve out. I feel fairly certain. In fact, let me not say that. That's too much speculation, so I'm not going to go there about how the U.S. benefits from such matches. We all will have a suspicion that they will strike a harder deal than we would. But we need to strike a hard deal, particularly since we have said we are good at this. We have shown we're good at this. We stage a good party, and people are interested in coming. And so that is the other admonition that I would have for any future tournaments, that we look carefully at what we can carve out for ourselves, in particular in relation to revenues, instead of a long blanket list of what we will not charge taxes on, whether we can look at if there are items that we can exclude from that exempt list, Mr. President, and earn some additional revenues for the people of Barbados. Because if it's tax revenue, then it's our revenue. Different from if a developer comes and builds something and perhaps goes along about their business, Mr. President. Mr. President, data. We need data to assess the real benefits of these activities to the people of Barbados. And after we finish partying, after we finish having a good time attending the matches, the important thing is that Barbadians feel, every Barbadian can say, I get why we do this. It has benefited me. Mr. President, I'm obliged.
Thank you very much, Senator Watson. Senator Mandora-Nate, if there are other speakers? Sorry, okay. Senator Dr. Mandora-Nate, please wrap up.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I'm going to need your guidance, please, because I believe that if I attempt to respond fully to both Senator Walters and as well as Senator Watson's indications, that I might find myself having to rehash pieces of legislation, resolutions, green papers that this Honourable Chamber would have previously debated. Mr. President, we would have previously debated the resolution for the loan that was much touted here, the $50 million Barbados that we would have borrowed to support the Kensington rehabilitation. Mr. President, we would have had a thorough discussion on that the 20th of December, Mr. President. And the Hansard report, Mr. President, will show that we went through in detail, certainly, every aspect of the infrastructure that was to be provided for, including the 3 practice pitches, Mr. President. We would have had a thorough discussion, Mr. President, on cricket development. Senator Gregory Nichols would have, again, as he has had to do again, and I want to encourage, Mr. President, my fellow senators, as they would suggest that some are not listening, perhaps they need to do some more thorough research and read the Hansard and reflect on the fact that we would have had serious debates on these matters previously. Mr. President, as usual, and perhaps as is the practice of the leader, we would see that the chamber becomes empty of the opposition members, Mr. President. Once a response is to be given. But Mr. President, I want to note a couple of things relative to what was said, and I will perhaps start from the last speaker, Senator Watson, and in particular, her indication that we didn't focus particularly on the bill which spoke to the visiting police forces. And again, I'm sure that the Hansard report would indicate that in my rising and leading of this debate, Mr. President, that I would have made the indication that this was one of the central bills that we will be debating. I would have indicated as well, Mr. President, that those police forces, if needed, Mr. President, was very clear, if needed. I made the point continually, Mr. President, that this was a piece of legislation in the context of where we are now and the global threats that was there if needed. I again would have also made the indication that those persons were to be treated, Mr. President, like local police under the command of the Commissioner of the Barbados Police Service. Mr. President, those points were made very much at the beginning. And again, I am sure that the report will indicate that those points were made and ventilated. So that the suggestion that somehow we were hiding it from the public or didn't want the public to understand, Mr. President, is completely untrue. But I also appreciate that the opposition leaders, opposition members as well, are much distracted.
Just for the record, Senator, I didn't hear any accusation of there being anything being hid from the public, because I certainly would have intervened to get that. The senator expressed an opinion in relation to the relative focus on the two matters under discussion, but it was not accusation of attempt to hide. That was made in another matter, and I had that struck for the record.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I also want to note as well the indication about data and the need for data. And I want to point to the very recent Central Bank report. I believe that the Central Bank governor gave this report, I think just about 2 days ago, if I'm correct, just about 2 days ago. Mr. President, in that Central Bank report, you would note that Barbados has experienced real GDP growth of 4.1%. Mr. President, this is data. This is data. This is data, Mr. President. Mr. President, in fact, the Central Bank report, again, data shows that real GDP growth of 1.4% was driven largely in part, not in part, because I want to make sure that I read. It says tourism led the economic expansion during the first quarter of 2024 that increased airlift capacity and promotional initiatives helped to achieve record levels, Mr. President, because I did hear one of the honorable senators indicate that one of the legacies is that we have failed, Mr. President, to increase airlift and tourism. This is data, Mr. President. There's been a call for data, Mr. President. Let's have the data. Mr. President, I want to go on, Mr. President, because this Central Bank report as well, when in terms of looking at economic activities, also details exactly the total amount of visitors, Mr. President, that has helped us achieve that 4.1% in real GDP growth. This Central Bank report as well, Mr. President, talks not just only about the tourism arrivals, it also speaks to the non-traded activity, noting that strong tourism activity bolstered growth in the non-traded sectors in the first quarter of 2024. It increased demand for travel agency services, tours, amusement parks, recreational activities. It led to expansion in the business and other service sectors, which represents 40% of the total non-traded activity. Data, Mr. President. Data. Because the suggestion would be that there is no data to back up the position of how this economy is doing. Mr. President, the Central Bank produces reports quarterly, Mr. President. And I would agree that perhaps we may need to have more drill down. But it is clear, Mr. President, that we will have the evidence, particularly as it relates to tourism. And I also want to identify, because we heard about share the burden, but the benefits, and we're not sure about the benefits. And Mr. President, again, in the context of being sure that we are all listening to one another, I was very clear to identify all of the opportunities and benefits that will be given to entrepreneurs, Mr. President. That was part of government's deliberate design in the hosting and development of how we will run with World Cup 2024, Mr. President. I indicated, Mr. President, that there would be significant opportunities directly in Bridgetown, that there would be opportunities as well outside of Bridgetown in Haymans, that there would be opportunities in Oistins, Mr. President, for the average Barbadians to benefit from, Mr. President. That was said on this floor. All who have ears, let them listen as well, Mr. President. And of course, Mr. President, that data in terms of how many entrepreneurs were facilitated, Mr. President, can be had, Mr. President. That data, Mr. President, just as I can from the National Culture Foundation, every time that we do a tour, every time that somebody makes an order, can identify exactly the amount of that order, Mr. President, that data can be had in relation to sales that happen. Call for data, Mr. President. data can be had. The benefits, Mr. President, to the average Barbadian in terms of the hosting of this World Cup 2024 is not shrouded, Mr. President, in any big layer of secrecy, Mr. President. The benefits that for the fisher folk are not shrouded in secrecy, Mr. President. The fisher folk, the people who ply their trade at Oistins, can let you know immediately if they have seen increased sales, Mr. President. That is data too. They will let you know, Mr. President. The people that sell the balloons and the sweets and stuff on the road, Mr. President, can know and feel, Mr. President, if they have had increased sales. That is part of the data too as well, Mr. President. The gift horse, Mr. President. They continually want to kick the gift horse, Mr. President, in the mouth. They support, but show the data. They support, Mr. President, but we're not sure we're going to see the benefits, Mr. President. They support, Mr. President, yes, we agree. But we got to look at the interest payments, Mr. President, on the debt. The interest payments, Mr. President, that help to refurbish Kensington Oval. And Mr. President, I want to also state, and again, I seek your guidance because I will be referring to something that I had to raise in another debate on this matter, again, of the loan. Because, Mr. President, I had pointed out in that debate, and again, the Hansard report will show, that investment will be returned. I had indicated, Mr. President, that the government had invested in the installation of a 800 kilowatt photovoltaic system at Kensington Oval. And that system, Mr. President, is intended to be revenue generating, Mr. President, Hansard, Mr. President. I also at that time indicated that Kensington Oval was also going to be undertaking additional initiatives, including working with the University of the West Indies and cricket legends to see an expansion of tours, including Marble Cricket Tour, Mr. President, which has already started. I spoke, Mr. President, as well to the fact that Comey, Mr. President, is working on a grant. In fact, the grant was approved. At that time, it was not, but it was approved from the Caribbean Development Bank to examine the feasibility of leveraging the brand to sell cricket-based goods and services globally that are produced by micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises. I spoke to the fact that Comey right now is looking and developing a plan to sell the naming rights of Kensington. I spoke about the fact that Comey is looking to see if we can use AI and the universe, the metaverse, Mr. President, to develop a game for Kensington and the enhanced efforts into marketing, Mr. President. That was in a previous debate. There was a previous debate, Mr. President, in here on the Green Paper on the sports policy, in which, again, we had a long discussion about cricket development because cricket was one of the areas that was prioritized for development along with road tennis. And that Green Paper, Mr. President, if we would all remember, identified cricket as a tourism potential for sports, Mr. President. It looked at cricket and IT, sports development and IT, Mr. President. It looked at all facets, even in terms of human resource potential, the human resource buildup that we need, Mr. President. It was the Democratic Labour Party that criticized the government in the estimates for indicating that we will have mini stadia throughout this country. The leader of the opposition said we don't need no mini stadia, but yet now we have a member here who's saying what's happening at the community level and what we're doing for sports. So they need to get the story right, Mr. President. Don't bring the factionalism in this honorable chamber. And that was a previous debate, Mr. President, that we had in here on those issues. So again, to be raising the issues, Mr. President, I find is unfortunate. Like I said, I would understand because I could understand right now they're a little bit distracted, Mr. President. But we've had those debates. We've had those debates fully ventilated on the future of cricket development, what was happening at the school level, Mr. President. We had the debate in here. We talked about the fact, and I went back to my own speech, that as part of the development here for Kensington, that we will have drop-in pitches, Mr. President. And that is not happening now, but that is part of the development and the long-term rollout that this government has for the vision of cricket, Mr. President. Mr. President, I was present at a meeting with Comey and the BCA, where in the context of discussion about the repayment of the loan, as the Honourable Senator Nichols has had to indicate, Mr. President, that one of the things that had to be done was a plan for cricket development by the BCA, and that was the basis upon which the continued investment by government will be made, because we understood as a government, and the Prime Minister challenged the BCA to ask them, what is your plan for the development of young cricketers? And that is why, Mr. President, you have the Ministry of Youth and Sports and Community Empowerment developing a plan for cricket coaches that is now being undertaken and rolled out in community to encourage the resuscitation of cricket at the community level, Mr. President. That is happening, and again, discussed in this honourable chamber. Again, so that the honourable members for the opposition side, Mr. President, please, Mr. President, I'm going to ask them, we give them a blight this time. Mr. President, I refuse to jump up on my feet because I said, okay, they're distracted. But I want to encourage them to make sure that before that they bring these pluralist arguments in this place, in this honourable chamber, that they recall, Mr. President, the debates that we have had in here. And it is unfortunate that I have been forced to spend the time of the honourable chamber referring to previous debates that we would have made, previous points that we would have made in respect of these matters, Mr. President. Mr. President, I want to ensure the Honourable Senator Christopher Maynard, in respect of his entreaty in relation to culture and heritage and the protection of culture and heritage, as the Honourable Senator would have indicated, the Physical Development Plan has an extensive section on culture and heritage, has an extensive section on how we would make sure that in the rollout of physical development plans in the future and approvals, that we would make sure that we seek to protect those areas. The Division of Culture is working very closely, again, as Senator Maynard would have alluded to, with all of those agencies that are so charged to be able to do so, to make sure that we work together collaboratively to make sure that we can protect those areas. The Division of Culture is, again, looking at legislation. We're now very in the early stages. We will be establishing a committee, again, bringing all of those agencies together in order to look at the rollout of the legislation to actually give tooth to the protection and also the process that is to happen when things like skeletal remains are found on various sites. But, Mr. President, it is on top of mind, and I want to thank the Honourable Senator for bringing the issue and making sure that we are sensitized to it, because it is extremely important. Our legacy is about culture and heritage as well. Mr. President, there was some discussion, again, about the long-term economic benefits. Mr. President, I will close shortly because I said I believe that all of the issues were either previously ventilated in other debates as well. But just to be able to say, Mr. President, it is about how we measure as well long-term economic benefits for this. The government of Barbados, recognizing that crop over will be happening immediately or after we have had Cricket World Cup. If you look at the marketing that has been taking place, we have been marketing the synergy between the two, telling people you come for World Cup but stay for crop over, Mr. President, offering packages so that we encourage those to either come back or as they travel around to the various islands, make sure they come back to Barbados here to participate in an activity. Mr. President, there is also as well, and I agree that we have to be able to measure, because it is something about the tourists who visit that may come for cricket, but come here in 2024, but because they love the island so bad, will come back in 2025, Mr. President. And the leader of government business is telling me that Barbados has the highest rate, what did you say, of repeat tourism rates in the world, Mr. President. But I don't want to just talk about tourism, because my whole presentation, Mr. President, and again, people also have to listen as they want others to listen to them, was all about, what was it? People and the benefits for people, Mr. President. It was about the benefits for people and for the ordinary Barbadian, and that is the long-term, that is the long-term benefit, that is the legacy benefit, Mr. President, that this country will have from Cricket World Cup, Mr. President. That is the legacy benefit that we will have. Yes, Mr. President, it is the investment in cricket. And that is why we are doing Kensington Oval. That is why we will do the drop-in pitches, Mr. President. That's why we have the multiple different types of covers. I'm not an expert, so I can't remember all the different, I think we got 2 different types. Her Minister said, God got 2 different types of covers to be able to facilitate. Making sure that we will have a facility where we can do indoor cricket, Mr. President. That is also part of the roles and part of the longer-term development of Kensington. So that is there, Mr. President. The data is there that they asked for. The data is there. The benefits for the average man, that is there, Mr. President. Are we still going to butt? Are we still going to butt, Mr. President? Are we still going to butt? Is this government saying that in our efforts, we may have covered 100% of everything? No. But this government is saying is that it is making and has made every single effort to ensure, Mr. President, that it is deliberate design that we have as much as possible made sure that we have attended, one, to the inclusion of people. And as I talk about the inclusion of people, I also want to recall that there was the issue of vendors, Mr. President, being relocated. And again, you know, it's unfortunate how people like to string things together and pull strands from here that are not related. Mr. President, the vendors that were moved were vendors that were moved from the bus terminal, Mr. President, in town. The Granville-Williams bus terminal, Mr. President. Because there was reports that the bus terminal was leaking, Mr. President. So for everybody's safety, we had to move the vendors, Mr. President. We didn't close them. It had nothing to do with World Cup. The roof was leaking. And already we have said that as soon as the repairs are completed, those vendors will be returned to their place, Mr. President. Nothing to do with World Cup, Mr. President. But we can hear the big hullabaloo, remove vendors, Mr. President, as a scare tactic, as to be able to fool the public, Mr. President. Mr. President, as I close, I want to close where I started. Because again, there are some of us, when we talk about data, we talk about economic benefits, that are not able to see anything else. And the economic benefits are important. But I want to suggest, Mr. President, again, that there is a national pride, that there is a holding back of the shoulders and a raising of the head that will do something to the Barbadian psyche, Mr. President. From us being able to say to the world that we will host the best World Cup there is, that we can, Mr. President. There is something that will happen, Mr. President, to the little boy that is intended to have a career in cricket, when he feels that he can be proud that his country, that the little 2x6 place where he comes from, and the community is the one, Mr. President, that is lauded. Mr. President, is the one that put the best foot forward in the hosting of this Cricket World Cup, Mr. President, and that is legacy. That is legacy that we cannot buy or pay for, because once we have that, once we are able to inculcate that sense of pride, that rallying, Mr. President, then we have a Barbadian that remembers, Mr. President, that remembers that journey from struggle to resilience, Mr. President. That we have that Barbadian who remembers that they will be able to overcome. And that is something, Mr. President, you cannot buy, Mr. President. You cannot put a price on. It is those intangible things, Mr. President. Legacy things. And there are some things that a government has to do, Mr. President. And that the benefits may not always, in this case they will, but they may not always be seen up front in the short term. But there are things, Mr. President, that we do, Mr. President, for long term, Mr. President. Mr. President, again, I am fully in support of this bill, in support of the Barbados government's effort to ensure that we host World Cup 2024, in full support of government's efforts to ensure that ordinary Barbadians can benefit, in full support of government's effort to ensure, Mr. President, that we can say to the Barbadian public who driving on the roads, Mr. President, to the entrepreneurs, Mr. President, that they will see benefits, Mr. President, from Cricket World Cup 2024. Mr. President, I beg that this bill be read a second time.
Thank you very much, Dr. Chantal Monroe-Knight. The question is that this bill be read a second time. All honorable senators in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Mr. President, I beg that Your Honor now leave the chamber and the chamber be dissolved into committee for further consideration of this bill. Leave the chair. Sorry.
The question is that I do not leave the chair, and the Honorable the Senate dissolve itself in the committee for further consideration of this bill. Will all honorable senators in favor please say aye? Aye. Those against please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
The Senate is now in committee.
Madam Chair, permission to call in parts, please.
Permission granted.
Part 1.
Madam Chair, as we consider part 1, I want to note that I want to inform the Honorable House, Mr. President, Madam Chair, I want to make an amendment, to move an amendment to part 1, where clause 3 previously was deleted from part 2 and is now to be inserted under part 1.
The question is that there be an amendment to part 1, which moves clause 3 of part 2 into part 1. All honorable senators in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. The ayes have it.
Part 2, clauses 4 through 22.
Madam Chair, I do beg that Part 2, clauses 4 to 22 stand part.
The question is that Part 2, clauses 4 through 22 do now stand part. Will all honorable senators in favor please say aye? Aye. Those against, would you please say no? The ayes have it.
Part 3, clauses 23 through 26.
Madam Chair, I do beg that Part 3, clauses 23 to 26 do stand part.
The question is that parts 23 through 26 of clause 2, 3 do now stand part. All honorable senators in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those against, would you please say no? The ayes have it.
Part 4, clauses 27 through 38.
Madam Chair, I do beg that Part 4, clauses 27 to 38 do stand part.
The question is that Part 4, clauses 27 through 28 do now stand, 38. Part 4, clauses 27 through 38 do now stand part. All honorable senators in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. The ayes have it.
Part 5, clauses 39 through 46.
Madam Chair, I do beg that clause 39 be amended, 39(1) be amended to read, Mr. President, Madam Chair, where a person is engaging or is proposing to engage in conduct in contravention of section 720, deleting part 4 and part 5 and replacing it.
Madam Chair, although that is the actual amendment, is at 39(1), we are replacing parts 4 and part 5 as listed there, and replacing with the words 23 to 26, 27. You don't have to read out.
The honorable senator will be guided by the clerk and will put the information to the chair as appropriate. The chair will then put the question to the Senate.
Madam Chair, I beg that the amendment to clause 39(1), the words part 5, part 4, and 5 be deleted, and the words 23 to 26, 27, 28, and 32 be substituted therefore.
Question is that the words part 4 and 5 be deleted, that 23, 26, 27, and 32 substituted therefore. All honorable senators in favor, would you please say aye? All honorable senators against, would you please say no? The ayes have it.
So part 6, which is a new part, is inserted, and the senator would move the amendment, but it incorporates clauses 47 through to 51.
Madam Chair, I beg that clauses 47 to 51, originally in part 5, under the heading Remedies, have now been replaced under a new part 6 with the heading Miscellaneous. He doesn't have to read that out first. So, Mr. President, Madam Chair, I beg to move that clauses 47 to 51, originally in part 5 under the heading Remedies, should now be placed under a new part 6 with the heading Miscellaneous. And stand part.
Question is that an amendment do now stand part, and that amendment is that sections 47 to 51 under Remedies be moved into a new part 6 to be titled Miscellaneous. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. The ayes have it.
First schedule.
Madam Chair, I beg that the first schedule be the first schedule to the bill.
The question is that the first schedule be now the schedule to the bill. All honorable senators in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those against, would you please say no? The ayes have it.
The second schedule.
Madam Chair, I beg that the second schedule be the second schedule to the bill.
The question is that the second schedule be now the second schedule to the bill. All honorable senators in favor, please say aye. Aye. All honorable senators against, would you please say no? The ayes have it.
Report.
Madam Chair, I do beg that you now report to His Honor the President the passing of one bill in committee.
The question is that I do now report to His Honor the President the passing of one bill in committee. All honorable senators in favor, would you please say aye? Aye. Those against, would you please say no? The ayes have it.
The chairman has reported to me the passing of one bill in committee.
Mr. President, I beg to move that this bill be now read a third time.
The question is that this bill be read a third time. Will all honorable senators in favor please say aye? Aye. Those against please say no. The ayes have it.
Mr. President, I beg to move that this bill do not pass and be cited as the ICC Cricket World Cup West Indies Act 2024.
The question is that this bill do not pass and be cited as the ICC Cricket World Cup West Indies Act 2024. Will all honourable senators in favour please say aye? Aye. Those against please say no. The thanks the ayes have it. This bill is now passed and so cited.
Order number 4, sir. In the name of Senator Dr. the Honorable Chantal Monroe Knight, Minister in the Prime Minister's office, to move the second reading of the Visiting Police Forces ICC Cricket World Cup 2024 Bill 2024.
Senator Dr. Monroe Knight.
Mr. President, I beg to move that this bill be read a second time.
The question is that this bill be read a second time. Will all honourable senators in favour please say aye? Aye. Those against please say no. The thanks the ayes have it.
Mr. President, I beg to move that Your Honour do not leave the chair and the Senate resolve itself into committee for further consideration of this bill.
The question is that I do not leave the chair and the Honourable the Senate resolve itself in a committee for further consideration of this bill. Will all honourable senators in favour please say aye? Aye. Those against please say no. The thanks the ayes have it.
The Senate is now in committee.
Clauses 1 and 2.
Madam President, I beg to move that clauses 1 and 2 do now stand part.
The question is that clauses 1 and 2 do now stand part. Will all honourable senators in favour please say aye? Aye. Honourable senators against, please say no. The ayes have it.
Clauses 3 through 6.
Madam Chair, I beg to move that clauses 3 through 6 stand part.
The question is that clauses 3 through 6 do now stand part. Will all honourable senators in favour please say aye? Aye. Those against, would you please say no? The ayes have it.
Clauses 7 and 8.
Madam Chair, I beg to move that clauses 7 and 8 do now stand part.
The question is that clauses 7 and 8 do now stand part. Will all honourable senators in favour please say aye? Aye. Those against, would you please say no? The ayes have it.
Clauses 9 through 12.
Madam Chair, I do beg that clauses 9 through 12 do now stand part.
The question is that clauses 9 through 12 do now stand part. Will all honourable senators in favour please say aye? Aye. Those against, would you please say no? The ayes have it.
Clauses 13 through 17.
Madam Chair, I do beg that clauses 13 through 17 do now stand part.
The question is that clauses 13 through 17 do now stand part. Will all honourable senators in favour please say aye? Aye. Those against, would you please say no? The ayes have it.
Clauses 18 through 21.
Madam Chair, I do beg that clauses 18 through 21 do stand part.
The question is that clauses 18 to 21 do now stand part. Will all honourable senators in favour please say aye? Those against, would you please say no? The ayes have it.
Clauses 22 through 24.
Madam Chair, I do beg that clauses 22 through 24 do now stand part.
The question is that clauses 22 through 24 do now stand part. Will all honourable senators in favour please say aye? Aye. Those against, would you please say no? The ayes have it.
Schedule.
Madam Chair, I do beg that the schedule be the schedule to the bill.
The question is that the schedule be now the schedule to the bill. Will all honorable senators in favor please say aye? Those against, would you please say no? The ayes have it.
Report.
Madam Chair, I beg to move that you do not report to His Honor the President the passing of one bill in committee.
The question is that I do now report to His Honor the President the passing of one bill in committee. Will all honorable senators in favor please say aye? Those against, would you please say no? The ayes have it.
The chairman has reported to me the passing of one bill in committee.
Mr. President, I beg to move that this bill be now read a third time.
The question is that this bill be read a third time. Will all honorable senators in favor please say aye? Aye. Those against please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Mr. President, I beg to move that this bill do not pass and be cited as the Visiting Police Forces ICC Cricket World Cup to 2024 Act 2024.
The question is that this bill do not pass and be cited as the Visiting Police Forces ICC Cricket World Cup 2024 Act 2024. Will all honorable senators in favor please say aye? Aye. Those against please say no. Methinks the ayes have it. This bill is now passed and so cited. And based on the amendments made as directed and as approved by the Honourable Senate, on your behalf I will sign the necessary formal message to the House of Assembly for their concurrence in those technical amendments. Senator Cummings.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Having concluded government's business for today, I beg to move that the Senate be adjourned. Sign it.
The question is that the Senate be now adjourned sine die. Will all honourable senators in favour please say aye? Aye. Those against please say no. The ayes have it. Senate now stands adjourned sine die.